Goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
unfortunately, it catches on its Johnson.
If he's plank of the week, he's got a sizable plank.
That's a whole different show.
Plank of the week, Fridays at 7 on Talk.
Hi, I'm Kevin O'Sullivan, and I've got a message for you. Welcome back to this blockbuster edition of What Just Happened. It really is a good one, I think. It's so funny that people keep calling me Meghan Markle, because it's Meghan Sussex now.
Flynn has said, Samara, I agree with you all the time, but you're just boring.
I refuse to work for ITV ever again.
Oh!
Oh!
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. Happy Monday morning to you. It's just coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, always utterly fabulous to have your company. Don't forget, if you miss anything of the show, you want to go back and look over stuff we talked about last week, you can go to my YouTube page. It's called the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, very cunningly, so you can easily find it. You can hit subscribe and you will never miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking about whether middle-class workers on really what you might consider to be a nice but average median type salary could be facing higher taxes later this year. This after the Transport Secretary Heidi Alexander, who doesn't have an EV as we've established, has suggested that the government has promised not to increase taxes for people on modest incomes, but higher income earners could be called upon to plug the financial black hole. The trouble is, an awful lot of people will be considered by the government to be higher income earners who don't necessarily think they are when it comes to actually the money in their pocket or their bank account at the end of the month. Also, Labour's been accused, what a surprise, of hypocrisy yesterday after they criticised planned strikes by junior doctors. Angela Rayner, the Deputy PM, has got a new workers' rights bill, and that is set to make workouts even easier. So when Wes Streeting and the others in the government criticised the BMA for having only a 55% turnout in their ballot to strike over a 29% pay demand, it's a bit rich when Angela Rayner and the rest of the government pushing a bill that will scrap the legal 50% turnout minimum threshold. So we're going to have more of these strikes. Oh, yes. And now the nurses want more as well. It's almost like you could have predicted this would happen. Oh, yeah. And we did. Plus, the Met Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley, has said it is shameful that black boys growing up in London are far more likely to die than white boys, as he admits that relations with minority communities are still difficult for the police. But strangely, he failed to mention in that interview on Sky News the reason why black boys are more likely to die. Well, they're more likely to die at the hands of other black boys. Why was that not brought up as part of the discussion? We're going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about the Met Office basically saying this extreme weather we've been largely, I would say, overall enjoying over the last few weeks is the new normal. And breaking news in literally the last 2 minutes. Is the news that the BBC has just published their report into the allegations against Greg Wallace, the MasterChef presenter. There were 83 separate allegations made against him of inappropriate behaviour, language, and indeed some of groping and physical conduct. But it's been found that 45 of those 83 allegations, so over half, just over half, were found to have been substantiated, according to this independent investigation, including one of unwelcome physical contact with a younger female member of staff. So we're going to give you the details on that. Of course, this all ties in to lots of pressure the BBC's under, with a report also due out today into how on earth the BBC were able to screen a documentary about life for children in Gaza, presented by the son of a Hamas minister, a government minister in Gaza, a proscribed terrorist organisation. Who knew what, when, who lied, and who allowed it to go ahead. Of course, it's since been pulled from iPlayer, but we will keep you posted on that as well. All that coming up, and delighted to say, joining me for all the chat is the commentator Sam Armstrong. A very, very good morning to you. Good morning. Always so good to see you. Now, I must point, actually, I was incorrect there just in terms of Greg Wallace, is that it's the production company Banjay UK that produces MasterChef. They shared a summary of this report on their website. This has been carried out by the independent law firm Lewis Silkin over 7 months. But the programme, of course, is shown on the BBC. It's seen as a BBC show, isn't it? So it wasn't an internal BBC thing. But just your reaction to that, because this comes as the chief of Ofcom has been saying that actually the BBC is losing the public's trust. There's issues about anti-Semitism, about their inaccurate reports on Gaza, star after star after star being able to get away for years with inappropriate, sometimes sexually very predatory behaviour, and nothing is done until it goes into the newspapers. Nearly always it's the Sun that goes, by the way, with Hugh Edwards, renowned in the BBC for being predatory towards younger male members of staff. But no, do host the election nights and the Queen's funeral and the King's coronation. You're absolutely fine. Greg Wallace, or call blimey governor, the jogging cheeky greengrocer. But he said that all the serious allegations against him, he said last week, had not been upheld. Certainly one of inappropriate, unwelcome physical contact has been upheld. 45 of the 83 allegations. It's bad for Greg Wallace. He's been sacked. But how bad is this for the BBC?
Well, look, I think it's very serious because so many of these allegations took place over such a long time. And one of the things that this investigation upheld is that there had been almost a dozen complaints over the years about Greg Wallace. And because of the way he'd kind of been working on different programmes, every single time a complaint was made, it was treated as if it was the first time. And that points to a serious, endemic, just basic management flaws at the BBC.
But he was spoken to. Apparently in 2019 he was given a "you can't behave like this" sort of conversation, and he apparently carried on and nothing was then done.
Well, to be fair, 94% of the allegations all refer to a period prior to 2018, so it does seem like there was a stop. But for years and years, and this happens in every media organisation, he was seen as, quote unquote, the talent, untouchable, and nothing seemed to be able to be done about him, whereas a junior producer would have been treated very, very differently. And time and again, it's not ITV, it's not Channel 4, it's not Channel 5, it's not Sky or Netflix or Amazon, it is the BBC where these problems are happening worse than anywhere.
Do we just focus more on that, because we've seen the issues with Philip Schofield and at ITV, and lots of other issues. There's allegations of bullying going on. Mind you, BBC Breakfast, big allegations of bullying there on the BBC Breakfast team. Again, we're not privy to what has actually happened. But again, it all plays into this sort of issue of BBC and trust. And of course, one of the things we've got there is also this report that's coming out today in terms of this Gaza documentary, where utterly bizarrely, a documentary about life for children in Gaza seemed to be let's find an ordinary kid in Gaza. Oh, well, they did find an ordinary kid. That ordinary kid was the son of a Hamas minister. Now, it was an independent production company that did it, another production company. But we know that this documentary was viewed by two of the most senior figures in BBC news gathering. They saw it beforehand. Now, if I saw that documentary before it was broadcast, and I did see it, after it was broadcast, my first questions would be, so who's the kid? How do you find the kid? Right, and so someone in that production company either didn't bother, or someone didn't do the research on who this child was, who his parents were, which is surely one of the first things you would check, because surely you can't just talk to a child and pay a child and employ a child without knowing who the parents are. I don't know, unless there are lots of agents working in Gaza in this godforsaken genocide, starving, a piece of land. But at that point, did the people above them ask who this kid was? Who verified? Did people ask? Were people lied to? Were the two senior figures at the BBC, Deborah Turnus, the chief executive BBC News and Current Affairs, Joe Carr, the BBC's head of current affairs, these two women were the first to view this documentary before it was broadcast. Did they ask? Did they show due diligence? Were they lied to? Because someone's head has to roll. I don't know if it goes all the way to the top or it's just at the very low with someone lied to, but this is absolutely unacceptable.
And it's particularly serious because of this. You're always going to make mistakes in broadcasting. Any walk of life, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to get things wrong from time to time. Here's the thing, though, with the BBC. If you're making mistakes from a fair, unbalanced, unbiased perspective, half the time you're going to be too pro-Israel, half the time you're going to be too pro-Gaza.
That's what they claim. That's what they claim.
But time and again, the mistakes in this case always go one way. What is it that means the BBC, every single time, makes mistakes, has to apologise for offending Israelis, for breaching neutrality on this issue, and for broadcasting anti-Semitism? Why is it that this corporation seems institutionally incapable of reporting news about Jews and Israel fairly?
Yeah, it's as simple as that, isn't it? And it's quite interesting, just tying in on this, a report commissioned by the Board of Deputies of British Jews, which is carried out by Lord Mann, the government's anti-Semitism advisor, and Dame Penny Mordaunt, the former Defence Secretary, of course, a former Labour MP, a current Tory MP, basically into, I mean, neither of them Jewish, just like independent, just like looking at it from a partisan view. And they said they believe that anti-Semitism has been normalised in middle-class Britain, particularly in the professions, in cultural life, in public services, the NHS, in schools and arts and things, universities. And I'm like, well, yeah, in the public sector, on the left, where people on the left largely find a happier place to work, it has now been completely normalised. I meet people all the time who think that they are not racist people, who think they're the good, nice people, who express the most outrageously, blatantly, openly anti-Semitic things and don't even think they're doing it.
And speak to anybody in these industries, both in the public sector but also in creative spaces, a whole raft of industries, who happens to hold the other view, and they will tell you every day they have to go into work, keep their head down, stay stum, because if they open their mouth, if they dare to put another view forward in the civil service, in the public sector, they will be shut out, they will be shut down, they will be kicked out in some cases. And that is really what is most insidious, which is these people are going in and they are forcing their view upon not just their colleagues, but in part with the BBC, with the civil service, all of us, and anybody that disagrees is, as far as they're concerned, persona non grata.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. Now, I wasn't planning to lead on this item, obviously, just with that report into Greg Wallace, a major BBC star. I never saw the appeal. I'm happy to watch a baking show or a cooking show. I'd rather just watch a fun one like Bake Off rather than MasterChef. I've always found Greg Wallace and John Torode intensely unwatchable, personally. And I think, personally, I think, what I believe is institutionalised anti-Semitism, the BBC would be a far more serious issue than the Greg Wallace issue, which does seem to at least now have been resolved at long last. But we have got an institutional problem in this country with every major institution, public and private, but particularly public is more of concern because we pay for them and they have a duty of care where they just simply cover up any wrongdoing and can protect the institution and the senior people rather than worrying about what's right and what's wrong, and I think that tells us something. So much more to talk about. Let's talk about. Again, I'd love your thoughts and your calls on any topic we're talking about, as always. And I'll read the number in just a moment. But a lot of the focus this week is going to be on tax. It's going to be on the economy. Last week was all about migrants. Again, very linked. When you're spending billions every year dealing with an illegal migrant issue, and of course you've been importing, 10 million people in the last 10 years or so, or 20 years into the country. And you haven't seen any improvement in your productivity, your output, or your GDP. Maybe there's a possibility that that's part of the issue as well. But middle-class workers are going to face higher taxes later this year. That is what the Transport Secretary, Hadi Alexandra, has said. She said the government have promised not to increase taxes for people on modest incomes, she said. Well, actually, they said people who are working people. And whenever they're asked, well, what do you mean by working people? And Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, has been asked again today, but what do you mean by that? People who get, a paycheck at the end of, at the end of the month. Well, that's still most people. Even people I know who are on millions of pounds still get a paycheck at the end of the month. They just don't have to worry about it because they're paid so much. But basically, there was a £22 billion black hole, we're told, that was suddenly discovered by Labour last year. Now there's probably a 40+ billion black hole. U-turns on various policies. That money's already been spent. So the money, winter fuel, benefit cuts, they weren't going to save that much, but that money's already been spent. They're going to have to make it up. The economy's not growing. You name it, everything's going wrong. Inflation going up, pay rises for doctors and train drivers and everyone else. But when they talk about middle-class workers face the tax rate, the reality is most people, a large swathe of people who don't think that they are well off, who are struggling to pay the mortgage or the rent, who are saving for a holiday rather than going, let's just go skiing again, or anything, that these people are going to find themselves being treated as higher earners who are going to end up paying those taxes, aren't they?
Let me make a prediction now. Rachel from Accounts is going to destroy the British economy. Over the weekend, I was speaking to a businessman that's built a sort of 40-50 million quid business in this country, based himself in this country, always been here, never even considered leaving this country. Yep. He is now actively looking at Malta, at Portugal, at Italy, or, frankly, a Caribbean island, and there are thousands like him.
Does he have a spare room?
16,500 millionaires have left this country in the last year. Every single one of them goes, and when they do so, hundreds of thousands of pounds a year that they pay in taxes goes with them.
Don't the average millionaire pay the taxes for sort of 300 people or something?
The top 1% of people, earners in this country, pay 30% of the taxes. Every single one of them that goes not only takes those taxes with them, but every penny that they were spending in the British economy, and they are now spending it in a foreign economy. Taxes in this country have never been higher. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't ridiculous.
But we are still a lower tax economy from the average compared to most European countries, actually, Western European countries.
And you only have to look at what basket cases their economies have been. And we have enjoyed, comparatively, a better standard of life. And what are we replacing it with? We are replacing it with, basically, a European-like system.
But without the public services to match.
But if the British public wish to be like, and I don't believe they do, be like Greece, they would have voted for it a very long time ago. We have seen how this record ends before. This government is so paralysed out of fear at the extreme left-wing MPs that they inadvertently, accidentally got elected into Parliament, that they are unprepared to take any basic step to cut public spending. They are shoveling money out of the door as fast as they possibly can. Welfare, whack it up. Migrants, come on in. We've got a 4-star hotel waiting for you. Net zero. Fill your coffers. Green so-called entrepreneurs like Dale Vince, the Labour donor that's done very, very well out of this government.
How coincidentally.
Already. And we cannot just keep putting taxes up. The tax threshold in this country has never, ever been higher.
And I do think the tax rate, and again, this thing, fiscal drag, this concept that, people's going, oh, great, I've got a pay rise, brilliant, my pay's gone up. Well, since 2020, inflation has gone up by 25%. So you're 3%, 5%, 7%, 11%. It doesn't then go down. It carries on going. Inflation has gone up. I say everything you're buying, and some things like food, much more expensive. Rents, mortgages, much more expensive. But on average, things have gone up by a quarter. So even if your wages have gone up by a quarter, you think, oh great, well I'm just as well off. Except of course if you're dragged into the next tax threshold, and then lots of that extra pay, the pay rise, you're now being taxed more. And this is the thing: 50,000, just over 50 grand, you start paying 40% tax. Okay, but at 40 grand, that's the median. So roughly it's not quite the same as the average, but roughly the average earnings of a full-time worker in this country is 40 grand. Okay, in London it is 50 grand. So you're already paying 40% tax if you're an average full-time worker now in London, and a good swathe of people who are average full-time workers outside London are also on the top bit of their income when they get that pay rise and go, oh good, great, I've had the pay rise to cover all those extra costs I've got from the energy bills and the food bill and the cost of buying the car or everything else. But that's all. But 40% of that is going straight to the tax man. So you're not getting that full pay rise. Now, this is a big issue because we're talking about tax rates, 40 and 45%, which was supposed to be for the very rich. Yep. The very rich. And you pay 45% on over 125k. You could argue, those people are very well off. But then, But the idea that someone on 50k, we're talking about police officers, health workers, teachers, who are paying the higher rates of tax. I don't think that's what most of those people who are struggling to pay their bills and make ends meet are not sitting there going, yeah, I'm a higher rate taxpayer, I am so well off. They are not well off.
And remember, there's national insurance to pay on top of that.
Yeah.
And look, politicians think they're very, very clever by not raising the rates, by just doing it on the threshold. But we have noticed, Julia, we have noticed across this country, there are millions of people that can remember a time 10 years ago when they could go afford. They've done the right thing. They work hard. Dad's a police sergeant. Mum works in IT. Something like that. People who've made all the right choices, and they can remember 10 years ago they had a BMW on the drive, they'd worked hard, it was on finance, they got to go to a couple of weeks in Spain in the summer and maybe a week at Centre Parks in the spring.
Love a Centre Parks.
That was a life that lots of people had, and they have seen it evaporate to the stage where they're going on holiday to Cornwall this summer. Still a lovely place to go, but they couldn't quite justify a foreign flight. And that BMW's been replaced with a Nissan or something else, something they don't want as much.
But the key thing is hard-working, aspirational people who've done well are now struggling, which they didn't have to do.
They can feel that they have felt themselves.
They're not stupid.
Get just a little bit poor over the last 10 years. So when they see migrants washing up on our shores and all of a sudden got their hand out, it does rankle. It is frustrating because they had something. It has been robbed from them, and they want to know who it's been given to.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. We haven't even got to peace summits between Prince Harry and King Charles, or indeed the extreme weather in the UK is now the new normal. Well, we all better get aircon then. Wouldn't cheap energy prices make that easier? Just throwing that out there for you, Ed Miliband. We're going to talk about that. And also, why do the women players at Wimbledon get paid the same as the men when they do so much less work to get their prizes? Just saying. We're going to talk about all of that. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense. Actually, before I say that, I should give you the number, just in case you've forgotten it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to have your say. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Greg Wallace. I'd love to hear your thoughts on taxes, especially middle-class workers facing higher taxes in the autumn budget. That is just basically the conversation we are going to continue to have throughout the summer. That and all the migrant arrivals as well. What is your reaction to that? 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs altogether now the standard network rate message. This is Talk.
cards, takeaways, driving lessons, even getting stuff from Fortnum and Mason, for crying out loud. Crazy golf. I mean, it does make you go crazy, doesn't it?
It certainly does. I mean, this is no big surprise. I mean, in the last 5 years, there's a thing called the Asylum Seeker Support Scheme. This is taxpayers' money. In the last 5 years, we've spent £6.6 billion.
This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Lots of common sense from Sam Armstrong as well, and as always on the line from you guys as well. I did actually put out a message online asking you about middle-class workers facing higher taxes. What's your reaction? Yasmin says they would do literally anything but cut spending. I mean, yeah, it's fascinating actually, isn't it, how often the conversation on TV will be, well, you know, you have to plug the spending black hole somehow, so you'll have to put up taxes, won't you? There is never ever a question of, so you'll need to cut spending. I mean, that's where they start, isn't it? Graham says, a higher rate taxpayer, I have no problem with this. I love capitalism. I think it's the best way to lift people out of poverty. He's right. It's frankly the only way. But those who don't participate in it, nurses, army, police, etc., should also be able to afford to live a decent life also. Oscar says breaking an election promise should require a new election. We'd have elections every 3 weeks on that basis, wouldn't we? James says, of course they will. After all, you can't tax the rich, can you? Well, no, they can tax the rich. They do already tax the rich. But if you tax the rich more than they're already paying tax, they leave. Jeff says, so the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, and we're stuck in the middle paying for both. The poor, I don't think, are getting poorer, and the evidence is actually the rich have been more heavily taxed than ever before. So, again, there's this narrative that the rich don't pay tax. It's absolute nonsense. They do. They really do. Otherwise, they wouldn't, top 1% wouldn't account for 30% of all tax paid. This is just a complete lie that is put out. And there's this narrative in the media. Let's go to the phone lines. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Daniel is in Epsom. Hello, Daniel.
Oh, hey, Julie, how you doing?
Very well indeed. Lovely to talk to you. What do you want to say?
Well, I suppose I'd be part of this squeeze middle because I'm a higher rate taxpayer. I've just paid corporation tax and 2 lots of personal tax for my wife and I think what the government don't see or understand is it's people like me that are driving the economy forward. So I'm spending probably £400 or £500 a month in kids clubs. So cricket, gymnastics, dancing. You know, I've got 3 kids under 12. We're always doing something or other. It could be swimming or party. I mean, it's costing a fortune, but it's all part of having kids. Yeah. You know, I'm running 2 cars.
And you're lucky enough to be able to afford it, which lots of families can't.
Yeah, I mean, I'm paying for holidays. We're having a patio redone. My wife's always spending money on the house. So you've got.
It's what we do. It's what we do.
Yeah. So, but the point is, if you take people like me out of the equation, right? If you take people like me out, or you make us considerably poorer,
we're not spending that money.
Yeah, but I can still probably get by. But all that happens is I change all my kids' clubs from £400 or £500 a month, and they will do one thing each a week, down to £100. I don't get that new sofa. I don't buy the new washing machine. She doesn't redo the patio. We don't have the gardener in every other Thursday. And I think what happens is then is the economy in general. It only takes a couple of 100,000 of me's to cut back a little bit, and then you've got the cumulative effect across the economy. See, what happens in this country is most people, or a lot of the people who voted in the last general election, they couldn't remember the UK before 1997, right? Yeah. I could, and there were about a quarter less people milling around in general, right? And things were a lot safer on our streets. It was a more homogenous country. I mean, it wasn't utopia, but it was better it was tangibly better, right? In lots of ways.
It has changed incredibly in that time.
And in that time, I was in my mid to late teens, right, in 97. After sort of Blair got in and rubbed the noses of the right in diversity and started off this chain reaction, I think this country's got tangibly worse, noticeably worse every year since.
Yeah, and also just that general sort of looking down the nose at people. And I was always in danger. You're talking about what you spend money. I think, oh, good for you. Like, yeah, isn't this what lots of people strive and work hard so they can do for their kids and give them a start? Perhaps they didn't have themselves and have those wonderful family experiences. And as you say, also that employs a lot of people. Daniel, I think you've absolutely nailed it. And I don't think Labour get people like, even though ironically, a lot of them are those people themselves, interestingly. But of course, a lot of them in the public sector, they haven't actually made that money, from starting a business and employing people. Daniel, thank you for that. I'm going to squeeze in Andrew, who's in Hertfordshire as well, wants to have his say on middle class tax. Good morning to you, Andrew.
Yeah, good morning. We've spoken about it before.
Yeah.
And Sam will bear this through. If you tax jobs, this is what happens. And you look at the Bank of England, he's just marked her homework and said, you have got this 100% wrong.
And that's the number of people saying that companies simply not taking people on because of the national insurance hike on jobs.
Yeah, and that's like, you've broadcast something wrong and, you're in front of the beak. The reality of this is that now it's going to get really nasty because there is no money. And every time they announce something, they announce spending. They're never actually doing anything. So everything is spending money, like this joke this morning. But they never talk about out of earned income.
Yeah.
They do the end number. To spend 25 million on something, the country's got to earn 50. And that's what she won't talk about. And the reality of it is she's going after earned income, national insurance on pensions. That's what they'll do. You're being paid a pension. There's no national insurance on it each month. She puts 10% on that. That solves all her fiscal problems. And that's where she's coming.
That will be very interesting. Thank you for that. We'll look out for that, Andrew. Thank you. 10:32 is the time. Going to take a quick break. Up next, we are going to be talking about, where we are in terms of tax. Also, in terms of Nigel Farage, apparently, beats Keir Starmer in every respect when it comes to voters on every single thing except one metric. We'll find out what it is up next. We're going to talk to a Reform UK London Assembly member, Alex Wilson, about all of that. This is Talk. welcome back to the show. 10:35 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with me, joined right now by Alex Wilson. He's an Assembly member for Reform UK in London. A very good morning to you, Alex.
Morning, Julia.
And thank you very much indeed for joining us. Let's talk middle class tax, because we are looking at middle class workers facing higher taxes later this year. Many who are on sort of pretty much median incomes, roughly average incomes, either outside London but especially in London, facing going into higher tax thresholds, just even without any changes with the fiscal drag, but actually more taxes going up. How big an issue is that, do you think, for your voters?
I think it's a huge issue for everyone, not just our voters, but everyone in the country facing yet another tax hike from this Labour government. We saw the budget last year, uncontrolled spending, and then ramping up taxes particularly on jobs. The national insurance tax hike is very much a tax on employment. It's hit low paid, it's hit part-time workers, and it's hit sectors like hospitality and retail particularly. And don't just take it from me. Listen to someone like Sacha Lord, who was a Labour advisor to Andy Burnham in Manchester. He hasn't got a single good word to say about Rachel Reeves and what's the damage that's already been done. But as you say, that's just the first stage. We're now going to have another wave of tax hikes, and particularly it sounds as if it's going to be targeted towards those on slightly higher but not necessarily exorbitant salaries, and it's those people who have been dragged into higher tax thresholds because the thresholds have stayed where they were, and just people like the caller you had a couple of callers ago, just working hard, trying to earn some money, trying to provide for their family, and getting hit time and time again by this Labour government. And I guess we kind of knew that a Labour government would be like this, because they always are. Probably didn't expect it to be this bad this quickly, and that's what gives us as Reform an opportunity to get on the political map in a big way.
Not such a bad thing for you, including also the abject failure to tackle things like key issues for many Reform voters and certainly Reform leadership, things like migration. We had that announcement last Thursday. I mean, it just blew my mind how maddening that one-in, one-out migrant policy was that the Prime Minister signed with Emmanuel Macron. We're told the European Commission has to okay it and agree it, which is strange, because I understood that the immigration policy was actually a matter for independent nation states. I mean, Germany's able to close their border. They've cut arrivals of asylum seekers by about 40%, pretty much overnight, because Donald Trump has managed to do on the Mexican border by simply shutting the border. What do you make of the chances of that one-in, one-out deal actually happening, and do you think it'll actually make any difference?
It's tinkering around the edges. I think it's capped to around 50 people a week. So it's really very, very minor.
Well, that's
kind of gimmick.
The trial. That's the trial, they say. The pilot.
But we'll see. We'll see if the European Commission says it can go ahead at all. I'm not convinced. We've heard rumblings from other countries like Italy and not happy with the idea. Fundamentally, what we need to do to get on top of this problem is stop the pull factors. Stop being so attractive for people coming here, and it's being put up in hotels, having free medical care, free dental care. I mean, you and I would probably struggle to get NHS dentistry, and yet you come here illegally on a boat. It's there, handed to you on a plate, and it's ridiculous.
Well, your DOGE unit, which is or DOLE, isn't it? The Department for Local Government Efficiency, run by your former party chairman Zia Youssef, over the weekend emerged, about just the extraordinary amount of money that was being spent by local councils, often then funded by central taxpayers. But either way, taxpayers are paying for all this, giving out money for sort of migrants to go and get, Big Macs and pizza, day trips to go and play, mini, crazy golf, even vouchers for Amazon. At the same time as, people are struggling to get basic sort of, social care for their elderly relatives who might live a very long way away, struggling to get their bins emptied, and struggling to get potholes mended in their streets.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, whether it's funded by national government or local government, it's all taxpayers' money. Government doesn't have any money of its own. It's all taxpayers' money that's been raised from the productivity of people in the private sector who go out and create jobs, create activity, and create wealth for the country, and the people that are being hit time and time again. But you're absolutely right. The DOGE unit has been looking at this, and Kent, I think it's the first council where we've started to publish some figures, and there's really quite extraordinary things that money's being spent on. Crazy golf, circus trips, Amazon vouchers, and each individual thing might sound like a small item, but it all adds up, and it all adds up to money that could and should be being spent on the things that local councillors were elected to deliver, which is funding social care, filling in potholes, taking care of special educational needs, those big things that really, really matter to lots of people who are striving and working hard and not getting a fair deal. And that's got to change. And that's what our councillors were elected to, with a mandate to do that. And that's hopefully what we're going to be able to do.
Let's also, you mentioned that the private sector, people working hard, public sector, we've got a load of pay demands coming in. We've got BMA voting to strike last week, strike date set for the 25th July. Well, 5 days of strikes in the NHS by resident doctors, previously known as junior doctors, over what they are now demanding a 29% pay rise, which they say will get them back to real terms where they would have been if they hadn't seen losses since 2010. And again, I think, it depends how you measure it, but also pretty much everybody in this country has actually in real terms lost out, with massive inflation in recent years and wage rises not really covering most of that for most people. But what do you make of the fact that Labour have been criticising the British Medical Association, the trade union for the resident doctors, for their low turnout, saying although it was a 90% vote for strike, only 55% of BMA members voted for the strike, and indeed only 30-odd% of all resident doctors voted for the strikes, not all of BMA members. At the same time as Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister, is pushing through this employment rights bill, which is going through the House of Lords right now. I think it's back in the House of Lords today, which would basically scrap that 50% minimum threshold for you have to be over 50% for any strike ballot to actually hold sway. You can't have, 10% of people actually bothering to vote, but they were over that. But they're saying that 55% isn't enough to justify this strike when they are going to get rid of the minimum of 50% as a strike so that any strike ballot would be valid. What do you make of that hypocrisy?
That's exactly the word to describe it. It is pure hypocrisy. Because if you're taking away the threshold, I mean, look, it's far from me to give too much credit to the Conservatives for much of the things that they did in government, but at least establishing some kind of standards and protocol for strike ballots, fair play to them. And this is being stripped away by this Labour government, so that any threshold, any strike ballot wouldn't need a threshold now. So you're absolutely right. If it fell below that 50%, strike could go ahead, and it's the Labour government that's enabling that to happen, while, as you say, at the same time criticising the BMA for only having a 55% threshold, which would still have been allowed under the existing rules. But the doctor strike, it's very worrying, because the NHS is a vital public service that lots of people rely on, on a daily basis. And when we had the last round of doctors' strikes, then I think somewhere in the region of 1.5 million appointments were missed or cancelled or lost. And if we're going to go down that route again, it's certainly not going to help West Streeting trying to cut his waiting list. But what's quite striking, that even Polly Toynbee in The Guardian is saying that this strike ballot is a ballot too far. If left-wing commentators like that are saying don't do it, then you really do have a problem. I think the doctors have lost sympathy this time around, having had a bumper pay rise at the end of the last round of strikes, to then come back asking for more when everyone else is in the same position, struggling. We've had the financial crisis, 2008, lockdown, pandemic, COVID, the damage that done to huge sections of the economy. Everyone's in a worse place than they were. I don't think it's fair for the doctors to get double bubble.
And it's interesting, isn't it, that the nurses are already saying, well, hold on a minute, we're not happy with our pay offer. Let me ask you, look, all of these things, of course, play into, Labour plummeting in the polls, Keir Starmer plummeting in the polls. You think the economy, immigration, the NHS, three big issues, well, none of those seem to be going in the right direction, do they? But it's very interesting, a new survey by Ipsos, basically looking into, how people feel about various different party leaders. And it's very interesting that they'd asked about the positive characteristics, whether it was Keir Starmer, Nigel Farage, Kemi Badenoch, the Tory leader, what they felt about them. And voters believe that Nigel Farage, your party leader, is better than Keir Starmer in almost every respect, on every metric, being more in touch with ordinary people, paying great attention to detail, being a stronger leader than the Prime Minister, all of these different things. But on the one thing, a lot of personality, capable, you name it. The one thing he lost out on to Keir Starmer was they believe that Keir Starmer is more honest than Nigel Farage. Why do you think they think that?
Well, on that particular figure, it was only a very narrow margin between the two, effectively neck and neck. I think it's 32 to 29 or something of that nature. So I think that's probably a symptom of a wider mistrust in politics generally, which has been triggered by the failure of the Conservative government and the failure of the Labour government already. But those other key attributes that you talk about, strength and knowing what they stand for and feeling that they're capable, competence. Those are all really, really important attributes for a potential Prime Minister. And the fact that Nigel is ahead on all of those other key metrics is very encouraging for us as we head towards the next elections. Obviously, the general election is quite a way off, but there will be all sorts of other elections along the way. The opinion polling is still very strong. We've gained in council by-elections, I think, gained well over 50 seats in council by-elections week on week, just since Kemi Badenoch became Tory leader in November. So the momentum is definitely with reform. The polling is backing it up. The membership numbers are still very strong. And as I say, these council by-elections are real votes in real ballot boxes, because polling measures potential support, but actually to see that happening week on week, only last week we won another 4 seats in council by-elections. That's real people putting their trust in reform candidates to deliver the change that we need in this country.
I mean, you've got real votes to become a London Assembly member. We were talking about things that are very much nation street. Just finally, I wanted to ask you about London and London's policing, because yesterday I think it was an extraordinary interview. The Metropolitan Police Chief, Sir Mark Rowley, in an interview with Trevor Phillips on Sky News, said it is shameful, in his words, shameful that black boys growing up in London are far more likely to die before their 18th birthday than white boys. Now, I don't know if he's asking for more white boys to be killed or not, but what did you make of him saying that?
Well, it's a symptom of the fact that we have a very, very serious knife crime epidemic in London. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of incidents every year in London, up massively since Sadiq has been mayor. But what's come down over the last few years is the use of stop and search. In the last 3 years, the use of stop and search on London streets has halved. And I believe, indeed, I presented a petition to the London Assembly at the most recent meeting, asking the Mayor and the Met to increase the use of that technique, because I think it's very helpful, very useful in getting weapons off the streets. Now, I know there are arguments about community relations and that kind of thing, but fundamentally, if black boys are getting stabbed by other black boys, we need to do something about it. We need to get those weapons off the streets. We need to take back control of the streets and make London safe for everybody.
Alex Wilson, thank you very much indeed for joining us. He's a Reform UK London Assembly member. Appreciate you joining us. Going to talk to Norman Brennan, former police officer, in just a couple of moments about those comments from Sir Mark Rowley. But Sam Armstrong, can I come back to you in terms of this Ipsos polling, in terms of the traits of various different political leaders, but we are party political leaders, because it is interesting that Nigel Farage came out on top. I'm amazed that he comes out as less honest. One of the things I was thinking about Nigel is actually he's sort of brutally honest. He's probably too honest, I think, saying, look, this doesn't work, nonsense. Here's I'm having my fag, I'm having my pint, which a lot of voters do like. But those sort of polling, the idea of the personal traits and attributes of different party leaders, they play a massive role in terms of a party's appeal to voters, don't they?
Huge, and people underestimate, politicians do continually, how nuanced the public's view of them really is. And one of the things that's very interesting is people are very happy to vote for politicians that they don't think are totally honest, because they kind of price it in and accept it.
Yeah, but they don't think any politicians
They don't think any politicians honest. So you've got to kind of take a view in the aggregate. But what is really, really clear is there is nothing that the British public like about Keir Starmer anymore. Yeah. They have literally run out of nice things to say about him.
In a year.
I think I would struggle if I was back at school when my teacher told me, if you've not got anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
That would just be silence on the airwaves, wouldn't it? Really, I mean, so bad. It's genuinely shocking. Look, at least it's not Macron. Look, I mean, after watching that press conference last Thursday. So much more to talk about. 10:48 it's time. Give us a call. Love to hear your thoughts on all the topics. I have a funny feeling you're going to want to call in about the next topic as well. Talking about Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Police Chief, saying it's shameful that black boys growing up in London are far more likely to die than white boys. But why is it they're far more likely to die? And who's killing them? Oh, well, they didn't get to that little bit, did they? That's up next. This is Talk. Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
This is a Talk exclusive. We've been looking at...
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, do these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:52 is the time. Let's talk about what is going on in London in terms of policing. Why just London? Well, it is the biggest single police force, the Metropolitan Police, and often what happens in London also happens elsewhere. But it was very interesting yesterday to have an interview on Sky News with Trevor Phillips, who is a prominent broadcaster who also happens to be black, who also happens to have taken a lot of stick over the years for when he's done a few documentaries over the years pointing out some realities about racial disparities and pointing out that in this country they're not always about racism or inequality, they're about different cultural, family norms and other issues, often more to do with economics than anything else. But it was interesting in his interview with Sir Mark Rowley, the Metropolitan Police Chief, played out on Sky News yesterday, that the police chief said it is shameful that black boys growing up in London are far more likely to die than white boys. He says we can't pretend otherwise, that we've got a history between policing and black communities where policing has got a lot wrong, and we get a lot more right today, but we do still make mistakes. That's not in doubt. I'm being as relentless in that as it can be. And he said the vast majority of the force are good people. He said, but that legacy, combined with the tragedy that some of this crime falls most heavily in black communities, it creates a real problem because of the legacy. It creates concern. Let's talk about this with Norman Brennan, who's a former police officer. Good morning to you, Norman. I thought what was really, really interesting was that at no point in this conversation, although Trevor Phillips messaged me yesterday to say when I complained about it that he had mentioned this, I watched the interview back twice, he definitely didn't, that these black boys are being killed, but they're being killed at the hands of other black boys. That's worth mentioning, isn't it?
Well, I think, Julia, it's what is called the elephant in the room. Black Londoners make up about 13% of the London population, 13%, but are responsible for 45% of crime in London, 61% of the perpetrators, and 53% of black young lads are the victims.
I think that's certain crime, like certain violent street crimes, isn't it?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. It's the types of crime that we all talk about. It's gun crime, knife crime, violent crime, robberies, stabbing, shootings, murders. They're the premier crimes in London, where disproportionately young black children are both the offender and victims. And that is the elephant in the room that the Commissioner, maybe Trevor Phillips, sort of skimmed round, and what we all know. If something's the truth, we need to confront the truth.
Exactly.
And it's no good that the Commissioner trying to say that, yes, I'm really concerned. Well, of course, we're really all concerned. But let's tell the public what the truth is and let them know what we should be concerned about.
And when he said it's shameful, it's interesting how many people in response to that clip online were saying, what, are you saying you want more white boys to die to even up? And if we have equal number of white and black boys dying, then that's OK? I mean, of course not. But this is the thing. I've been saying for years, I remember, in a previous incarnation on a previous station more than 10, 12 years ago, saying on air that it was outrageous that a young black boy gets stabbed to death on a housing estate somewhere, and it doesn't even make the front page of the London Evening Standard because it's so normalised. But if it was my, white middle-class daughter, it would be on the front page because we've just said it's OK for this to happen. And that is, to me, that is what is shameful.
Well, that used to be the case, Julia, but I post on homicide, gun and knife crime daily. The majority of stabbings now, even where young girls are the perpetrator, it doesn't get much traction in the media. It's almost as though we've unwillingly accepted that our children and youth will carry knives as routinely as they do a mobile phone, and should they get involved in an interaction or an argument with anyone else, be they another child, an adult, shopkeeper, person in the street, there's a very good likelihood that they will stab that individual, or if in a fight, lose their own life as a result of their own
and we've just said that's normal, but that's such a recent development, and it is absolutely, frankly, as a parent of a teenager, absolutely terrifying development. But a previous caller mentioned, stop and search. Well, sorry, previous caller, not caller, I guess, Alex Wilson, an Assembly member for Reform in London. He mentioned, the issue of stop and search. We know that stop and search works. We know there's issues in terms of how people treat the people they're stopping and searching. We know there have been some incidents in the past. We know that. However, many, particularly mums in particularly Afro-Caribbean communities where these violent crimes are often rife, are actually desperate for their kids to be stopped and searched to stop them carrying the knives in the first place. And yet the Met Police have massively cut that.
You're absolutely right, Julia. I mean, it'd be fair to say that I'm probably Britain's lead and certainly longest knife campaigner.
Yep.
Served 31 years in the police. As you know, and many other my followers know, I was stabbed in the chest, nearly died arresting a burglar. I know the devastation of knife crime. Let me just tell you what nobody seems to grasp, and this is the government and the criminal justice system. 5 years mandatory sentencing if you carry a knife in a public place without lawful authority or excuse. 3 years if you're a child. It will stop within months, or certainly reduce dramatically.
They say they do that, but a tiny fraction of people, even on their second carrying offence, go to prison. We know Axel Rudikabana caught, I think, 6 times with a knife on a bus. Nothing happened.
I totally agree. We also need mass stop and search. You hit upon it and said that there are certain people in the black community, their community leaders, and certain people in the black community don't like being stopped and searched. Well, I can tell you, I meet the parents of children who have been stabbed to death or shot to death. They don't like their children being shot and stabbed to death and planning funerals rather than bright futures. We need an education programme. We need mentors. We need personal and parental responsibility.
We need dads. We need dads.
We do. They're always on their toes. I cannot tell the amount of times I took a robber home and I saw mum with 2 or 3 children. And on the route back to the nick, I said to my partner, within another year or two, once he's an adult, we'll be locking him up and we'll be sending him to prison for years. What a sad indictment on our criminal justice system and communities, and certainly within the black communities. That really...
But again, it's the stuff that people don't like to talk about, but actually there are many, many issues going on. There are cultural issues, there are family and normalisation, which need to be talked about. Norman Brennan, you've been an amazing campaigner on this. Former police officer, Norman Brennan, thank you for that. Sam Armstrong, this is it, particularly Afro-Caribbean communities, something like 45% single parents, not having to go at the mums, but where is dad? You need a strong role model in the home, but also just the prevalence of this violent knife crime that is killing young black boys. What is shameful is that is being allowed to happen.
57% of black Caribbean families are single household, single parents, 22% of white families. That's the difference. That explains a massive part of the difference in crime rate. If you care about black kids, the one thing you can do is convince and encourage as much as possible black families to stay together, because that is
parents,
what the biggest factor is.
Children need dads. Children need dads. It's as simple as that. They need families together. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Loads more coming up. This is Talk.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week, the one show where you do not have to be worried about judgmental people because we'll do all the judging for you. Let's just have a look at how Humphrey Useless is now spending his time.
There goes your career, mate.
Over there a bit is over towards where all the migrants come in. He's jumping there. There he goes. He goes over the bar.
Hello,
and
lady.
Unfortunately, it catches on his Johnson.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Lots and lots to talk about today. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it's fantastic to have your company. Also, the company of commentator Sam Armstrong, who as always joins me on a Monday. We have got so much to get through. If you miss any of it, why would you? Why would you? What with having a job, a life, and goodness knows what else to do, you can go to my YouTube page. We've cunningly called it the Julia Hartley-Brewer Show, so you've got no excuses not to find it. If you hit subscribe, you will never miss a thing. Now, coming up today, we're going to be talking more about middle-class workers facing higher taxes later this year. Also, the BBC is losing the public's trust. It's not just me saying it, it's the head of Ofcom. They're occasionally right about something. They've warned ahead of a critical week for the corporation. So 2 reports out today. One into the behaviour of Greg Wallace by the independent production company Banjay that employed him to front MasterChef. Well, that report has already come out an hour ago and it's not looking good. But also a report into how a Gaza documentary featuring the son of a Hamas government minister was aired by the BBC. That's also due to be published. Going to talk about that. Also going to be talking about Labour's hypocrisy, criticising the British Medical Association for their 55% turnout for their ballot of resident doctors to go on strike later this month. A 5-day strike, the first of many, if they don't get what they say is a 29% pay rise demand. At the same time as the Deputy Prime Minister Angela Rayner's bill is gone through the Commons, it's going through the House of Lords right now in their new workers' rights bill, will abolish the Tories' 50% minimum threshold for any strike ballot to be considered legal and valid. What hypocrisy? Well, we'll talk about all of that and plenty more besides. Do get in touch. I'd love to hear from you on anything we are talking about, including what conversation we just had about the Met Police and Chief talking about how it was shameful that black boys growing up in London are more likely to die before their 18th birthday than white boys. Also about middle-class workers facing higher taxes in the autumn budget. But I tell you what, though, you might think it's the rich we're going to pay. Well, if you're on 40k and you live outside London, you're on the average wages. You're heading towards, with a few pay rises, towards paying higher rate tax at 40% on the margin of your income. If you're a median worker in London, you're already the top of your pay, over 50k, paying higher rate tax on everything you earn above that. So do you consider yourself to be the rich who should be paying more? Because you, unlike the billionaires, can't afford, like me, to go and live abroad. You need to keep your job, don't you? You haven't just got wealth coming out of your ears. Well, you're going to be the people expected to pay for all those spending projects which the government keeps announcing. Let's hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Don't forget, of course, calls are charged at the national rate and text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Let's get back to the conversation with Sam Armstrong. As I say, so much to talk about, but let's start first with that report from the independent production company into Greg Wallace on the BBC. This is a report that has been carried out by Banjay UK. They're the independent production company, and they've shared a summary of their report into historical allegations of misconduct against the presenter Greg Wallace, one of the double act presenting MasterChef. This is an investigation into inappropriate behaviour. Now, it turns out there were 83 allegations against him, the vast majority, as you pointed out earlier, having been made before he was first sort of given a talking to a few years back about his behaviour. Most of them were between 2005 and 2018. Just one substantiated allegation taking place since then. Now, Greg Wallace said he'd been cleared of the most serious and sensational accusations against him. However, looking at 45 different complaints from 41 complainants. Eight apologies. It's complicated. 83 different allegations against him from 41 complainants. 45 of those have been substantiated. So over half. All of these are related to MasterChef specifically, people he worked with, guests on the show and the like. Now, he's already been sacked by the BBC last week. As you were pointing out, Sam, a number of these are historical. But, you know, we're not talking about 1960. Yeah. We're talking about a few years ago, you know, before lockdown, for goodness sake. But clearly, judging by this, and I'm very much, look, you know, innocent until proven guilty. He's not been found guilty in a court of law. A lot of this is going to be he said, she said. But when a number of people come forward, I mean, there were 13 women originally, then another 50, say, I've seen this, I've felt this, inappropriate language, the dropping of the trousers, the whole,
Yep.
you know, oh, he can't wear trousers, he can't wear pants because he's got autism, these nonsense things. There is a pattern of behaviour, but it's not just limited to Greg Wallace, is it?
No, although I'm going to take a risk here and say I've spent the last hour having a little bit of a look at this report, and there is a little bit of sympathy here for me towards Greg Wallace. Look, we've got 45 allegations over 20 years, so roughly 2 a year, basically. And of those, 41 were for quote-unquote inappropriate sexual language or jokes. And the inappropriate language includes allegations being upheld against people swearing.
Yeah.
Now, I've worked in some offices.
I'm out of a job
in which swearing is commonplace, and there is a little bit of me. There are now 4 more serious allegations, 3 in which he was seen by someone in a state of undress, and 1 of quote unquote unwelcome physical contact.
Only one of which was upheld.
We don't have any more information about it than that, and there is a little bit of me that says, do you know what? I do worry about going back 20 years in a guy's career and turning around and saying, you swore in 2005
you're
in
a bad
front of
person.
a member of
No,
staff.
I know. Look, I've got a lot of sympathy on that, and that's one of the reasons why when I hear of someone having an allegation of bullying or racism or lewd behaviour against them, I do think, oh, hold on a minute, tell me what, you know, like, or a joke, an inappropriate. Tell me what it was, because again, I think people are accused of these things all the time when it's abject lack, you know, absolute nonsense. And again, I do think we've got a whole load of very, very, very woke young people who are, frankly, you're unemployable. You're unemployable. You're taking over the workplace and you're making them not fun anymore. And that's the reality. And I know lots of people who say, do you know what, I'm happy to stay on Zoom because I don't want to go in the office because I'm afraid I'll say something and get myself sacked. I grew up in a newspaper industry where, I mean, frankly, I start work at 5:30 in the Evening Standard, and if you weren't called the C word before 5:45, you weren't in the gang. I mean, it was completely normal. Nothing. I mean, wouldn't even raise an eyebrow at it. It's one of my favourite words. Now, that would instantly get you sacked. Okay, that would instantly get you sacked, somewhere like the BBC. But this is the thing. We're not talking about Harvey Weinstein here, and let's not make him out to be a monster. We're not talking about someone who's raping people and using women. And again, that's where, like, the Me Too issue, you know, you have to get things in perspective. But we're talking about inappropriate behaviour that apparently did not stop enough, that he doesn't recognise that is inappropriate. I think I'm pretty sure that most people manage to go through all of their working life without showing their genitals to their co-workers. I'm going out on a limb here. I think that's perfectly possible in pretty much, unless you are, I don't know, a dancer and you're changing in a communal area, I'm pretty sure most people, I'm pretty sure Greg Wallace gets his own dressing room and doesn't have to show his meat and 2 veg to young female researchers. It's totally inappropriate. Is this an issue, though? Is this an issue with Greg Wallace, or is this an issue about the BBC failing to come down hard enough and tackle? Because I'm sure that someone like him, despite his apparent autism, as he claims, would actually understand very, very clearly, listen, mate, if you do this again, you're going to be out. Next time, last time, end of. He would get it, but no one did that.
Well, that is it. And I worry that happens right across the public sector, but especially at the BBC, which is there isn't somebody there, senior, sensible. We've all had these bosses in our own life who, you know, you start out as a young person, you're a bit exuberant in the workplace, who can settle you down and just say, look, no more, knock it off.
Oh, I never had that.
And there is nobody with, I think, an iota, a scintilla, a little modicum of common sense at the BBC who was able to turn around and say to Greg Wallace, look, contrary to your view, quite a lot of people do like watching Greg Wallace on the TV. Greg,
I know he's very popular. Doesn't do it for me, but, you know.
We like watching you, Greg. You obviously cannot open your door wearing this, but time and time again, there were 14 times allegations were made against him, and each and every time it was treated like it was the first time it ever happened. And it wasn't. There was a pattern. And in a sense, I think actually the BBC failed both him and the junior staff by as a boss, as an organisation, not having the basic standards that we'd expect.
But again, we all know the rules are different if you're a big star.
Yeah.
Hugh Edwards, you know, this probably I can't name because there are court cases going on, but they involve other channels, but they also often involve people who've worked at the BBC. Again and again and again, we've just heard that the rules are different if you're a big star.
But it's like in schools. good rules, strict rules, well enforced, are actually good for everybody involved, because they stop stars losing their way, going mad. And I can understand it if everyone's telling you how wonderful you are, that maybe it gets to your head. Actually, no, what you need is somebody there, somebody senior, somebody with some experience, a grey head perhaps, that's prepared to say, look, you're a very talented guy, but if you carry on like this, your career's going to end, as it has done, in a blaze of ignominy in the Sun newspaper.
Talking about the BBC more generally, and there's lots more to talk about, but we've got another report out today. It's also into this Gaza documentary, which was basically all about Gaza, how to survive a war zone. It was aired by the BBC in February. I watched it online soon after it went out when I saw the initial report saying, hold on a minute, this is listen, young lad, very, very personable young lad, walking around and showing what life was like in the war zone, and talking to some other young boys and girls about their lives. One of them was a young female influencer with her cakes, and I thought, you're living in a starvation genocide zone, but apparently you're an influencer with cakes. But there we are. But it emerged later, and again, this was found very, very, very easily by those who bothered to look into it, that this lad was the son of a minister in the Hamas government. Now, the Hamas is a proscribed terrorist organisation. Money was paid to this lad's family. So presumably, I mean, was it in cash? Was it a bank transfer? Why is the BBC paying a member of a proscribed terrorist organisation? I believe that would be a crime if that took place, would it not? The fact that it was so easy for someone externally to find this out, when one would assume they knew the identity of the lad. He'd been in other documentaries and other things before. He was already identified as the son of a Hamas minister, i.e. a terrorist, and we've got to call them what they are. They are terrorists, OK? Doesn't matter if you don't hold the gun yourself, if you oversee this. The key thing here is that we know that senior figures, Deborah Turness, the chief executive of BBC News and Current Affairs, Jo Carr, the BBC's head of Current Affairs, these are two very, very senior women who watched the documentary before it was broadcast. Lots of the senior people did. Who in the documentary making organisation, who knew that this kid was the son of a Hamas official? Who asked who he was and double-checked? Who was lied to? Who was told the truth? Because if Deborah Turness and Jo Carr watched that documentary and didn't say, so who's the kid? How did you find the kid? You know, we've got a massive issue over trust on Gaza, so we need to make sure we know who this kid is. Were they told the truth? Were they lied to? Well, at some point, whether it's high or low in the middle, someone needs to get sacked, because someone either lied or someone, I think many people, knew who this kid was and didn't think it mattered.
But Julia, the BBC wanted this to be true. They were desperate for this documentary to be true. They loved the idea of a little kid in Gaza walking around with big bad Israelis coming round and murdering and destroying and everything, and they wanted to know and they wanted to hear just how wonderful Hamas, the literal terrorist organisation, was at administering this territory. Let's be clear what Hamas does. Hamas steals hand over fist from the Gazan people. Hamas is using them as literal human shields. Hamas is radicalising each and every child that goes through the schools that it oversees. It is the most insidious, awful organisation ever. But at the BBC, when they were shown this documentary, they wanted this story, this total nonsense,
isn't this wonderful?
this crock-a-doo-doo to be true.
Even some of the editing, his kid changed his shoes 2 or 3 times, and his hair grew and went shorter in documentary clips, which were apparently only sort of hours apart. Even as a trained, seriously, as a trained TV producer, you would go, oh, this doesn't look right.
You have to want to not to see it, and they did.
Because the institution is institutionally anti-Semitic. A point I made to a senior figure and got told off by that senior figure for making that accusation to him only a few weeks ago. Anti-Semitism is rife among middle classes across the media, across education, across the arts, across the NHS. That is the subject of a report by Lord Mann, a former Labour MP, and also Penny Mordaunt, Dame Penny Mordaunt, and now a Tory MP, of course, former Defence Secretary. Defence Minister, this is the thing. It is so rife. It is the acceptable racism in the white left-wing middle classes, isn't it?
Absolutely right. And you go into any civil service building, into the BBC, you sit there around the water cooler, and many people who work at these organisations will get in touch with us, and they will tell us, look, I see it day in, day out.
Free Speech Union.
Free Speech Union, they call into to stations like this. We all know it's going on. And my heart goes out to those people who have sensible, ordinary, perfectly respectable views, and I happen to agree with them, share them, who have to go into workplaces like this and they have to hide what they believe because of the knowledge that if they ever express their view, that they will be ostracised and shut out of even the most basic career progression.
I do wish people would stop shouting Zionist at me as if it was an insult. Not an insult, I'm afraid, guys. We were just talking a bit earlier, and we'll come back to about middle-class workers facing a looming tax raid. Your thoughts on that, very welcome. Your thoughts on everything we're talking about, very welcome. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Of course, calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. But that tax, actually, we're going to see taxes going up across the board in the autumn. Everyone knows it. They've turned an apparent £22 billion black hole in funding down up to over 40 billion. Funnily enough, we haven't had 2.5% growth. Imagine everyone's surprised. We're going to have all these demands for pay rises. We've got inflation going up, unemployment going up. I mean, everything is going, all the metrics are going in the wrong direction. Taxes are going to go up. But meanwhile, the one thing the government will not walk away from is the absurd net zero policies. Now, we're going to talk about these a little bit later, but Ed Miliband has been talking about, this basically the new normal and these climate warning. He wants to do an annual sort of state of the climate a sort of statement to the Commons. This is the Met Office issued a report today saying that extreme weather is the UK's new normal. When I hear that, okay, I mean, at the same time we were told that this net zero plan could cost the country £800 billion. Rubbish. It won't cost £800 billion. It will cost an awful lot more. It is killing our economy. That's just like the cost of doing stuff. The cost of actually the damage to our economy is off the scale. Damage to our defence alone. The fact that we are subsidising all the green energy as well. It's not cheaper. It's not more reliable. But when the Met Office say extreme weather in the UK's new normal, I mean, it's been hot. We're having a heat wave. Yes, we've had heat waves before. We're having more of them. Well, OK. So we're coming out of a mini ice age. We had worries about we're going into another ice age only in my lifetime, by the way. Weather fluctuates. Climate has trends, and they go in multi-decadal trends. If we're going to have more hot weather and milder winters, fewer people are going to die from cold. That's a good thing. More people are going to die from heat. That's a bad thing, but it's fewer than the people who die of cold. And isn't the solution cheap, affordable energy so we can all get air conditioning and have our fans on and we can enjoy the heat much more?
Julia, go to any part of the country, around the country, rural part of the country, and speak to a farmer, right? These are the people that are supposedly most at risk of this extreme weather. Ask a farmer, is your qualm with this government the fact that it is failing to adequately tackle climate change? Is it now impossible for you to grow crops in this country? No, it's ridiculous. And Steve Reed, the Environment Secretary, today was in the newspapers, or going out yesterday on the broadcasters, and saying, if you oppose our environmental plans, you are unpatriotic. This is the Labour MP for Croydon, Inner London, who had to be given a pair of £420 free wellies by Lord Ali when he got given the job.
I mean, that's how much, everyone knows that's how much wellies cost. Everyone.
These people we have no money. So we are gouging and destroying farmers to the extent that farmers are committing suicide in this country. We've seen
putting solar panels on prime land as well, crazily.
It is a tragedy. We've got no money, but we are told this morning, again in the newspapers, that we're going to have to fork out more money to subsidise middle-class people, upper middle-class people who live in inner cities to buy electric cars. They have got the priorities of this country so badly wrong. I cannot remember any government in my lifetime that has ever been so out of touch. I didn't agree with everything that the Labour government did under Tony Blair or Gordon Brown, but compared to this rabble, they at least had some sense of who this country were.
And they liked the people.
They broadly liked us. They had an understanding of what you needed to get the economy to grow. This lot wouldn't know how to run a major economy, not least the British economy, if it smacked them in the face. It is totemically bad, and it's only going to get worse. Ed Miliband is a lunatic let out of the asylum. The sooner he is removed from office, the sooner we will all be a lot better off.
But again, everyone tackles, Ed Miliband about this, and he is absolutely zealot on this. But he's appointed by Keir Starmer. This stuff was in Keir Starmer's manifesto. The Prime Minister, ultimately, and it's all funded by Rachel Reeves, the Prime Minister and Chancellor are just as culpable for all of this. And just no doubt, you can't say you're going to have a sort of steely focus on growth. You're not going to have growth with net zero. There is no country in the world that tries to rely for electricity on solar and wind or any other of those renewable, unreliable fuels. There is no country in the world that has growth and a strong economy and relies on unreliable renewables. It is simply not possible. You can't. They say we're going to beef up our defence. You can't beef up defence if you are focusing on having unreliable, expensive energy, because a lot of the defence procurement you're needing, you're going to the costs of producing the steel. It requires fossil fuels.
And energy isn't just a little bit more expensive in this country. We need to be really clear about that.
4 times what it is in America.
4 to 5 times as much it costs to make anything in this country. If you want to know how America, the most advanced, most productive economy in the world, still manages to maintain proper heavy industry. There's still those jobs where working men can go out every day, make big things, steel, coal, all the rest of it.
Stuff.
How is it that those jobs, which have been decimated in this country, left people, communities up, particularly in the north of this country, hollowed out from the inside? Why is it that over the last 20 to 30 years that trend has carried on in this country, hasn't in the United States? It's because it costs 5 times more to do it in this country. You just can't compete on that basis.
Exactly. And again, everything they say they want to do, net zero is the opposite of everything that we need to do in this country to be safe, to be secure, to be economically successful, to build, to make a great future. It is genuine. But, extreme weather's the new normal. I mean, I think we'll all cope with 30 degrees for a few weeks a year.
It's been great.
This is the thing, even
fabulous.
if it's too warm, I like to look outside and know it's out there. Put a fan on, for the love of God. I got a fan from a local, Robert Dyers for 20 quid. It's not, I'm sorry, it's just mad, isn't it? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all that as well. We're going to be talking to Rupert Darwell about it a little bit later too. Voice of sanity. 11:25 is the time. Up next, let's take your calls. Lots of different topics coming up. I still want to, by the way, get to this royal summit and how on earth did we find out about it between Prince Harry and King Charles? And also why women players at Wimbledon who played in the final for less than an hour get paid the same prize money as the men who played for over 3 hours. It doesn't seem like equal pay for equal work to me. Love to hear your thoughts on that as well. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Superman is an immigrant. And yes, the people that we support in this country are immigrants. And if you don't like that, then you're not American.
These Hollywood types, these liberal Hollywood types, you know, they live in a world that is not reflective of real America.
That's a privileged white man in Hollywood saying that. So they're always the mouthpieces for these weird movements that have nothing to do with what's actually going on outside the gates of their mansions in Hollywood.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong also still with us. Let's get straight to your calls, 0344 499 1000. Greg is in London. Greg, you want to talk about the massive threat of climate change to our lives, don't you?
Hello, good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you both. Good programme as usual. I was absolutely astonished. I know they're all a crowd of dopes, but for Steve Reed, I think he's the Environment Secretary, he comes on and tells me that climate change is the biggest threat to our national way of life. I'm sorry, Steve. The biggest threat to our national way of life is the Labour Party and the government. They're the biggest threat to our national way of life. I absolutely am loving this hot weather. I'm loving it. I refuse to walk around with a bottle of water.
Well, no, you'll die. You'll die, Greg. You have to have a bottle of water with you at all times.
I always, if necessary, nip into the nearest pub.
Good man.
They're still open after Rachel Reeves' vandalism. I think I've said enough.
I think you have. I think you've nailed it. I would say that's very much epitomising when you talk about the British way of life. It's keep calm and carry on, which is what everyone manages to do until we had this mad, hysterical BBC weather warnings. Greg, thank you for that. Barry's on the line in North Yorkshire. You want to talk about tax, but Barry, before you do, I point out actually that Barry and Greg both have something in common because you're now both facing a hosepipe ban because Thames Water in the last few minutes have announced they are following Yorkshire Water in imposing a temporary hosepipe ban because we haven't got enough water on an island where it rains half the year and we're surrounded by sea.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, Yorkshire Water, they announced it to start on Friday, and I dutifully got my watering cans out last night to do the watering.
I'm very glad that we had the hosepipe on for a long time yesterday. I hope we can save the garden lawn, but there we are. Yeah. Barry, what do you want to say about the tax issue?
Well, as an engineer, I like to try and conceptualise things, think in shapes and sizes and things.
Yeah.
And tax rises, whenever the government announce another £1 billion of tax rises, assuming there's 25 million taxpayers in the country, that may be 20 million, I don't know, but if there was 25 million taxpayers, that would cost every taxpayer £40 for every billion.
Yeah.
So it's just to give people a feel for how, when they're talking 5 billion, that's another 200 quid out of your pocket that's going to go, you know?
Yeah, and I think that exactly, it's very difficult when they talk about billions and even hundreds of millions. It's like, well, I don't know. What does that mean? What does that actually mean for me?
Well, that's it. If there was 20 million taxpayers, it would be 50 million for every billion.
Yeah.
You know, it's just to get a feel for, so to get your blood going and.
But the general view seems to be, well, if working people, quote, you know, people who get a salary at the end of the month, that they're not going to have to see their taxes go up. That's what the government has said, although we've already seen national insurance on employers go up, so that was a clear breach of manifesto pledge. Everyone expects that someone over there is going to pay it, but most people think that they are not high earners who are actually already into the higher rate of tax.
Yeah, it's just putting the pressure under the tax system, and that will filter down to the lower earners.
Yeah,
it will do.
It always does, doesn't it? Barry, thank you for that. So, Armstrong, well, this is a very good point, isn't it, actually? We talk about these big numbers, but they're actually loads of evidence. They're pretty meaningless to most people, these numbers. What people want to know is my pound in my pocket.
Yeah, and that is where people have seen themselves be continually hit over the last 10,
because
15,
we're
20
not
years.
stupid. We know how much money we have to spend at the end of the month.
The British dream, if you work hard, do the right thing, basically the deal has always been that you get a 4-bed house, 2 cars, 2 holidays a year and a nice garden.
That is, that is a nice life from, yeah.
There are people in Westminster, there are people in our line of work that look down on that sneer on that.
Yeah.
That is a good life for people who have worked hard, who've tried, really done the right thing. And it was an aspiration for many, many people, and it has been robbed. It has been slowly eroded by inflation, by profligate politicians, by taxes, by everything else. And the reality is now that British families are just struggling. It's just hard. They're not going out for dinners on a Saturday night.
And again, then they wonder why their kid can't get a job as a waiter.
Yeah.
Because there aren't any jobs going, and then it all.
It sounds minor, Julia, but if you're having to cut down on takeaways, if you're having to cut down on all of the things that gave you a little bit of joy
don't want to pull the
life,
migrant riders out of business.
and you're having to cancel your Sky TV and all the rest of it, and then you see the councils that we saw over the weekend are forking out for migrants. It's just, it's more than annoying.
But
it's
again,
unfair.
and it absolutely, exactly, it hits into that British sense of fair play, doesn't it? But again, for me, it's like the hosepipe ban. Worked very, very hard to afford a home with a nice garden. We spent a lot of time, trying to, the garden was like literally nothing there, building up a garden, and a lot of people feel the same way. A hosepipe ban. So the solution to the fact that you've not built any sodding reservoirs for 20, 30 years, I know they're planning to do some now, and again, Tories just as bad, I blame all of them. You guys don't do any proper planning, you don't build reservoirs, you import another 10 million people to the country, we then don't have enough water because we've had a couple of dry months, and then your solution is that you ruin my garden because I'm not going to spend 3 hours with a watering can because I'm not allowed to use my hosepipe. But people resent that, understandably, because people say, well, I worked hard for that.
Yeah, and we've had no trouble building 10 million new homes, which we have built, 80% of whom of which have gone to foreign people born outside of the UK.
Yep.
We haven't built the infrastructure to go alongside it, and that's because migrants don't arrive with a mile of road, they don't arrive with a GP spot, they don't arrive with reservoir capacity.
Yeah.
And we're told, oh, they boost the economy. People with an ounce of common sense can see it just ain't so.
Anyone paying attention realises this stuff, but not our politicians. Well, not most of them. We're going to talk more about this, no doubt, many more times. Do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Up next, going to talk to the Henry Jackson Society's Alan Mendoza. Stay tuned. This is Talk. Good morning, welcome back to the show. 11:36 is the time. Let's talk to Dr. Alan Mendoza now. He's the Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society and joins us to talk about, well, I mean, a whole range of topics, but all closely related. Alan, good morning to you.
Good morning,
Thank
Julia.
you for joining us. Can we talk first of all about the BBC? We've just been talking earlier about Greg Wallace, this report into his behaviour, but I'm actually rather more concerned about the anti-Semitism that I think is now rife and institutionalised in the BBC, and the fact that no one thought it was really a bit strange that there was the son of a Hamas government official who was fronting a documentary about life for children in Gaza. We're expecting that report from the BBC out today, and the key thing there is finding out, did anyone know or bother to check who this kid's dad was, given that outside organisations, including the campaign against anti-Semitism here in the UK, were able to find out very quickly through a cursory check online that this child was indeed the son of a member of a prescribed terrorist organisation who'd been paid by the BBC, and how senior people were in the BBC organisation, up to the head of BBC News, in terms of who knew. What do you make of this?
Well, it seems to me extraordinary that nobody knew. Surely you do background checks, particularly for going into an area where you are fully aware that you might be dealing with terrorist entities, and that at the very least you might be breaking sanctions rules, let alone dealing with prescribed terrorist organisations.
And you wouldn't be allowed to film in Gaza without permission from Hamas.
Well, exactly. So it seems to me that somebody must have known that there was some connection to the government of Gaza at the time, which was Hamas, of course. So from this perspective, it beggars belief. So we have to wait to see, Julia, don't we, to see what comes out into this report. But I think the BBC have got a legal case to answer when it comes to potential breach of British law in terms of this discussion.
Yeah.
And in terms of this documentary, it seems that they have gone beyond what the law allows, and I'd be quite interested to see how they try and spin their way out of that one.
Well, indeed, and again, for me, I find it absolutely extraordinary that there was a broadcasting, a pre-screening within BBC, which was of this documentary, was seen by the chief executive of BBC News and Current Affairs, that's Deborah Turness, and Joe Carr, the BBC's head of Current Affairs. And did they say, so who is this kid then? Did anyone up the ranks say, who is this kid? And no, either people knew and they lied about it, or they didn't know and didn't do the cursory checks, or they did know, and yeah, everyone in the BBC knew this kid was the son of a Hamas official and didn't think it was an issue. Any one of those three options is very bad, and heads at whether it's the lowest middle ranking or upper levels, heads need to roll, don't they? People need to be fired for this.
Yeah, I think this is unsustainable given given what we know already about this case. As you say, of those three options, none of them are particularly palatable. And the ignorance option doesn't fly, really, because when it comes to breaking sanctions rules, ignorance is no excuse. Yeah. You have to make stringent checks when it comes to dealing with sanctioned entities or people to make sure that you are complying, even if you don't think there's a case to answer from the very beginning. You have to show you've gone through the process. So something's gone wrong with the BBC's processes. And given that this is such a high-profile case, it seems incredible that we wouldn't have, some sort of action taken that would see heads roll afterwards. But we'll have to wait to see, won't we?
Yeah, exactly. And I have to say, I mean, I watched the documentary, and documentary, frankly, is rather a generous word.
Loose.
I mean,
Yes.
it was, other than, of course, all the rubble, it was more like sort of, a travel, showcase, if you ask. It just wasn't at all what I would expect from the BBC when I'm being forced to pay the wages of everyone involved. And in fact, some of my money, some of everyone's money watching and listening to this has gone to Hamas as a result. And last time I looked, that was a crime.
Exactly. And this is the whole point. This is the national broadcaster who's is a taxpayer-funded institution, and therefore it is indeed our money that's ultimately being fungibly put over into other people's pockets.
Yeah.
And so it is a different setup to other channels in this regard, none of whom would be allowed to do this either, in my view.
No,
but
exactly.
The BBC is a special case here. And doesn't it just go down to the point that the BBC has just lost this trust, all the trust it once had? It's been chipped away for years, as we all know, but it's really come to the fore after October the 7th. We've seen the BBC in all its ugliness, and it strikes me that it's very difficult to see a way for the BBC to come back from this.
Well, exactly. And we got not only with, and there's a report, obviously, we haven't got that yet, into Bob Villan shouting, death, death, death to the IVF at Glastonbury, and no one thinking it was necessary to pull the plug on that, which was extraordinary. And it's interesting. And I don't think they're right about many things at Ofcom. The Ofcom chief executive, Dame Melanie Dawes, said these repeated fiascos has started to erode public trust and confidence in the BBC. She says they need to get a grip quicker, get these reports and investigations concluded sooner. Otherwise, there's a real risk of a sort of loss of confidence in the BBC, which is a shame. And I couldn't agree with her more on that. And they brought it on themselves because, and again, this ties in with the next topic I want to bring into you, because this is a report commissioned by the Board of Deputies of British Jews, representing the country's sort of largest Jewish communities. And they commissioned a former Labour MP, now a peer, Lord Mann, the government's anti-Semitism advisor, and also the former Defence Secretary and Tory MP, Dame Penny Mordaunt. So two different sides of political divide, neither, by the way, Jewish. An independent report looking at anti-Semitism in Britain, and they found that anti-Semitism has been normalised in middle-class Britain, particularly in the public services, whether it's the NHS, whether it's in education, in culture, in the arts, in academia. And again, the BBC is at the heart of that. And I would say, yes, this is absolutely now normal. An awful lot of people who would be horrified to ever be thought of as racist against someone who was black or Asian or homophobic or transphobic, no issue whatsoever with holding and espousing views which are what are blatantly, openly anti-Semitic. Why do they not see how wrong that is?
Well, I'm afraid, look, firstly, the report itself, is anyone remotely surprised that this is the conclusion? None of us were going to go, were we? Oh, what a shock. Britain is, riddled, institutions are riddled anti-Semitism. We've seen it all. Everyone's seen this for their own eyes. It's an important report, but it is merely confirming what everyone has been able to see over the last few years. And the reality is it's getting worse, not getting better. Yeah. And it's been allowed to fester because the political leadership of this country has allowed it to happen in that way. It's allowed those marches on the streets, which did the most, I think, to normalise anti-Semitism in this country, the extraordinary things. I mean, these are things we'd never have seen even a few years ago, Julia, and now it's commonplace. What's happened to this country, really? You only have to look at those marches and you get the answer. It has gone to the dogs. It's gone downhill dramatically because of this sort of hatred that is spewed out week in, week out. This is not the kind of country we are, or certainly we used to be.
But it's masked, isn't it? Because, people don't shout that they hate Jews. They shout that they hate Israel, that they hate Zionists. People believe in the right of Jews to have their own nation state. But then we had people extraordinary over the weekend shouting, go back to Israel to people, even though they're opposed to Israel. I don't know. It seems like a no-win there for the people they're shouting at. But when someone, and I make it clear that I support, Israel, I don't know how you could not support Israel in the battle against the savages that are Hamas terrorists or Iran, the Iranian leaders. Zionist. I mean, I just had someone spit that word, Zionist. And I'm like, and you're saying it like it's an insult. It's not an insult. It's a political viewpoint. It's not an insult, and it's certainly not one that I'm ashamed to hold or espouse publicly. But they are masking, are they not? They are masking, or think they are masking, what there actually is, which is a dislike or hatred of Jews.
Yes, totally. But of course, it's coming out now. It started off as a mask, but the mask has slipped a long time ago. We've seen so many comments that are not simply focused on Israel, or Zionists, but are clearly directed, if not explicitly, but so obviously at Jews.
And attacks on Jewish-owned businesses.
Exactly, and all sorts of other sort of goods produced by Jews or services by. I mean, this whole thing is lunatic in terms of where it's gone, and you see the madness that's happening on university campuses, where graduation ceremony after graduation ceremony is being disrupted by this sort of pro-Palestine
performative. Look at me with my flag ridiculous. And my cafe.
Exactly, but this is part of it. The point is, it's been mollycoddled, it's been allowed. This is the reality, Julia. Are we surprised in the slightest that hatred festers when it's allowed to fester? There was an insufficient response from authorities at the start, and now the response is going to have to be a lot harder to put it back. Put the genie back in the bottle.
Key thing to remember: while women were still being raped and children were being slaughtered, and Israelis were being dragged, kicking and screaming, into Gaza to be held in tunnels. Some of them still there, 500 plus days later. While that was still going on that day of 7th of October, the petition went in to get the application went in to get the marches against Israel, the anti-Israel marches, the hate marches, as Suella Braverman, I think, quite wisely called them much earlier than I was calling them that. That went in before any action by Israel to retaliate against that horrific massacre of Jews on that day. But can you just explain, just to people, why people often go, well, I'm not Jewish, and a lot of people, if you don't live in, I mean, there's big Jewish communities in North London and in Manchester, but actually in large parts of the country, it's quite normal. A lot of people may not know anybody they know to be Jewish. It's only at 250,000 population in total. Why is it that anti-Semitism and the rise of that should be such an alarm bell to society generally?
Well, it's because anti-Semitism is the ultimate conspiracy theory. Basically, throughout history, if you look at this sort of phenomena, you've seen Jews being blamed for everything. Jews have been blamed for capitalism, for communism, for the weather, for the Black Death, for this, for that, the other. Whatever the answer is, it can always be this mystical Jew as the sort of answer in this sort of way. And because it's the ultimate conspiracy theory, because societies that go down that route, they never stop at simply the Jews. You've never seen a society who've gone, oh, let's get rid of the Jews and then we'll stop. That's just the starting point, and history's shown us time and time again. So we should all be taking a stand against this sort of hatred, because it's firstly false and a lie, and secondly, it leads to other people being attacked, and we know how that ends for everyone else.
Yeah.
So better to stop it at the start rather than at the end when everyone's been taken by
Now,
it.
a lot of the criticism of Israel has been over, attacks which involve the deaths of civilians in Gaza. And we know that Hamas are using Palestinian civilians as their human shield. But we also know, if anyone's paying attention, that actually the death rate of civilians compared to combatant Hamas fighters is actually extraordinarily low compared to any other normal warfare, but not that facts matter in this debate. But we have seen lots of reports of Israeli fighters opening fire on civilians, getting food aid and water aid. Now, again, amazingly, no video footage of any of these, even though everyone's got a video phone there. But Israel has blamed a technical error for a missile strike they say did kill 6 children collecting water in Gaza from a water tanker at the Al Nazariat refugee camp. They have admitted this, but they say it was an accident with a missile launcher. What do you make of that?
So, firstly, it's very sad. It's terrible when civilians die full stop. It's even worse when civilians die as a result of an accident. But I think this is an interesting case, isn't it? Because the Israelis have fessed up to it. They've gone, look, we've made a mistake. We got it wrong. And that's, interesting in and of itself, because that's what you would expect a Western liberal democratic army to do. We've done it, Julia. We had many an occasion, Afghanistan and Iraq, when we, had to hold up our hands and go, sorry, that was wrong, or the Americans in the same sort of, but we made a mistake in that way. That's what sadly happens in the heat of war. But to go back to the earlier point, the reason, unfortunately, civilians are dying, and you're right, of course, to highlight the lower ratio versus combatants in almost any other military arena we've seen. But the reason is because, sadly, civilians are legal targets when there are military units operating among them.
Yeah.
And so while one doesn't target the civilians, if there is a military unit, a terrorist unit within that using the civilians, unfortunately, under the laws of war, the Israelis are able to strike them.
Yeah.
And that is just the legal right to do so.
And they invariably give warnings and again, far more than we have ever done. Alan Mendoza, always good to talk to you, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. We're going to go to a quick break. Up next, we're going to talk about the NHS strike action by doctors, possibly by nurses, and why are we seeing a possible outbreak of measles? That's up next. This is Talk.
There is this anti-Semitism that does exist, and for some reason, middle-class people, I'm not saying they're any better or any worse than working-class people, what I'm saying is that the people who wouldn't dream of saying something that was racist against black people, or Muslims, or women, or gay people, or whatever, but they say it against Jews. Why is that, do you think?
Well, several reasons. Number one, I'd say first and foremost, is because that people wrongly think the vast majority of Jewish people are white, and therefore you can't be racist against someone who's white. It's exactly the same as we see with anti-Christian.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:53 is the time. Let's talk right now about NHS strike action. Sam Armstrong is still joins me. And before we get to our next guest, just very briefly from you, do you expect that this strike that called by the British Medical Association of Resident Doctors, 25th July, 5 days, do you think that strike will go ahead, or do you think that Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, will either pay them the 29% they've asked for or talk them down from that pay demand?
Well, I hope he can, because the absolute unavoidable consequence of this many doctors walking out for this long is that patients will die.
Yep.
And the blood of those patients is, as far as I'm concerned, on the hands of the union leaders. Resident doctors, junior doctors, they are junior doctors.
Some of them are very experienced.
So, look, they're at the junior end of their career, are paid comparatively well. They have excellent career prospects. They've just had a bumper pay deal. To come back a year later, try the same stunt again with a Labour government, shows to me that they are out of control, have been taken over by a far left faction, and it needs to stop.
OK, well, let's talk to Martin Gower about this. He's a former NHS Trust chairman. A very good morning to you, Martin.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much. Well, what is your answer to that? Do you think that Wes Street is going to be able to talk them down, or do you think sort of the government criticising them and pointing out you only had 55% of those who took part, members of the BMA, who actually took part in this ballot, and then 90% of those voted to strike? You don't have the remit for it. You don't have the mandate for it, they're saying.
Well, there's truth in that, obviously. My question is, I think that Wes Streeting is planning to have some negotiating meeting with the BMA this week. But I think we're in a situation where the government in general, their negotiating skills are not exactly highly rated.
No, let's get Lord Homer to do it over Chagos as well.
well, everything. Macron, you know.
Yeah.
I think we're into a situation where they're going to be a soft touch.
Well, they seem to think by giving, was it 22% last July to doctors, they'd go away and I think the day after they took that pay deal, they said we're going to get into talks about getting the next tranche of money.
This is only the start, they said, and we have the same thing, of course, with the Royal College of Nursing. Who
understandably are a bit peeved that they took a much smaller pay rise. And then the doctors are coming back for more. Nurses are going to come back for more, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the RCN are not quite as militant, I think, as the British Medical Association, rather pompously called that. I think they should be called the National Union of Doctors.
Yes.
NUD, that would more accurately describe what they do. And yes, I mean, Wes Streeting is right in the sense that less than half of the doctors have voted to strike. I'm slightly baffled by it all, in the sense that all the clips I see of striking doctors, they seem to be thoroughly enjoying what they're doing. It all looks like jolly good fun. They're all laughing and waving their placards as if they're, on a pride march or something. but it's really, really strange. I just think, and behind all this is my thing about leadership. I think they're getting the leadership from their union.
Well, the leadership is incredibly. I mean, look, we've seen this a lot has happened. The National Education Union for teachers as well. The BMA, they've been taken over by sort of basically the hard left. Their aim in life is to strike, bring down the government, etc., etc. It's not about doctors, paying conditions so much anymore, is it?
I don't think it is. I think it is about greed, though. I mean, let's be absolutely frank. And any sort of variation in what doctors do, whether they're junior doctors or not, immediately the BMA putting their hands out and say, yes, of course we'll work every other Saturday. Now, how much are you going to reward us for that? There's a kind of quite a greedy approach. And I think that's from a position of strength, because let's be honest, if doctors go on strike, as Sam just said, patients are going to suffer.
Yeah, and that's the reality.
And possibly even die.
But when they say that they're 29% worse off than they were back in 2010, again, it depends if you use RPI or CPI, then they'd be 4.5% worse off. But most people in this country are worse off because we've seen inflation and we've seen all these other problems that people have had over the austerity years and then lockdown and Ukraine and energy prices. So a lot of people are in the same boat. But it is interesting that often doctors are talking about, they compare to a time when, before we had the Working Time Directive, the EU Working Time Directive, which massively cut their hours. So they used to have limited hours and then they'd have bonus shifts. They'd work a lot extra hours and get more money. But they're comparing their base salary now with that, which is not comparing like with like.
No, it's definitely not. And I think the odd thing about it all too is that the latest legislation being introduced by the government about workers' rights is going to make it easier for everybody to strike, even on smaller percentages of their workforce.
It's no longer having that 50% base threshold, which again, then the government's saying, but 55% isn't enough. But they think the 50% is too much. I mean, the hypocrisy is rank, isn't it? Now, I've been very remiss on this because I've left only like 40 seconds of this, but MMR, very, very, very important. It is absolutely one of the safest injections people can have. My daughter's MMR, and I wouldn't have dreamt for not being. Lots and lots of people now are not giving their kid those absolutely vital childhood jabs. And we have seen a second child in a decade in this country dying of measles. We've seen outbreaks of measles on the continent as well because so few people are now getting their children jabbed. What do we do about it? And whose fault is it? Really briefly, Martin, sorry for that.
Well, obviously, GP surgeries should really, I was going to say, harass their lists to get their kids. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's very clear that certain ethnic minorities have a far lower uptake on MMR vaccines. Now, we don't know about the current things in Alderhay Hospital. Rightly, the children's background has been protected. But I do think there is an issue there too.
Yeah, absolutely. But for instance, in Black Afro-Caribbean groups are far, far less likely to have their kids MMR, and therefore their kids are more at risk, but also put other kids at risk too. Martin Gow, thank you for that. Sorry it was so short. Former NHS Trust Chairman Martin Gow. We have so much more to talk about on the show. News up next, and then after that we're going to be talking to Sir Ian Duncan-Smith and plenty more to come. This is Talk. A very good afternoon to you. Welcome back to the show. It's 2 minutes past midday. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you so much for your company. Just some breaking news in the last couple of moments. We've had that second report into, well, effectively, the BBC. As expected. We've already heard 10 o'clock about Greg Wallace, a report actually by an independent production company, Banjay, producing MasterChef for the BBC, which reported about obviously the number of allegations made against Greg Wallace, but more important, I do think this is much more important because this is about more issues in terms of trust. A report into a Gaza documentary which was featuring a young boy, basically talking about life in Gaza for children during the war, that was broadcast on the BBC in February, has since been taken down and off iPlayer because it emerged that the lad was the son of a Hamas government official. So, son of a terrorist, a man in a terrorist organisation. Well, a new report into that, an internal report from the BBC, has found that the BBC did breach its own editorial guidelines on accuracy by failing to disclose that the narrator of that documentary was the son of a Hamas official. Now, we've only just got that one piece of information so far, but the review found that 3 members of the independent production company did know of the father's position, but no one within the BBC knew at that time. Well, I'm sorry, that's going to raise big questions to me about, did they ask the right questions? Were they lied to? What checks did they make? What checks did they make sure that the independent production company had made? Who did they say the boy was the son of? Basic checks I would have expected to be done. So our heads going to roll at the production company or at the BBC, but if they're basically saying, well, we were lied to, we didn't know, then how did the BBC breach its own editorial guidelines? Or are they trying to have it both ways? Love to hear your thoughts on that and on any other topics we're talking about. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. We're also going to be talking more about middle-class workers being forced to bear the brunt of any tax rises this autumn. There just aren't enough wealthy people who'll stay to make them pay for it all. And we're also going to be talking about Net Zero Secretary Ed Miliband being accused of, well, this won't surprise you, spouting nonsense for saying that our way of life is under threat from climate change. Really? Is that the threat that we're facing? He's also been attacked for his £800 billion cost of his net zero plans. This as the Met Office has said that extreme heat and extreme rainfall have become the norm, which Mr Miliband has called a stark warning. Oh yeah, I'm going to get to the royals. Prince Harry's people and King's people have had a secret meeting to start a peace summit to try and basically resolve the differences between the two. Interestingly, they chose to do it at a private members club where they were likely to be recognised by pretty much everyone there. And then they're really surprised that it got out into the public. Well, we'll talk about all of that coming up. Delighted to say that commentator Sam Armstrong has remained with me. Before we go to our next guest, do stay tuned for him. It's Ian Duncan-Smith. Sam Armstrong, your reaction to that report that says the BBC did breach its own editorial guidelines, but that 3 members of the independent production company that made that Gaza documentary did know that the boy was the son of a father who worked in the Hamas government, but no one at the BBC knew at that time.
Look, this has taken 6 months. It has cost, according to the BBC, 98.5 grand plus VAT to state the bleeding obvious and to basically exonerate the BBC guys by saying, oh, well, they should have made more checks, but it's not really their fault. No heads are going to roll. Nothing's going to change. The BBC is going to continue its pattern of broadly broadcasting anti-Israel, at times flagrantly anti-Jewish content, and it's going to carry on. It's no wonder that Ofcom, which is a pretty woke regulator, even they will no longer sign off the BBC's accounts on this matter. It has gone on for too long. Yep. Tim Davie needs to get a grip or get out the way, the BBC Director General, because it's got to the stage now where it just cannot be disputed that every time that there is an issue of this nature, it is going one way, and it is not acceptable for the UK's national broadcaster, licensed to be payer funded, to be institutionally anti-Semitic, which, as you have said, it seems to be.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Your thoughts also on tax issues. I know a lot of people talking about that. Well, let's go to my first guest in this hour now. Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, Conservative MP, former Conservative Party leader, joins us. Very good afternoon to you.
Oh, Julia.
Love to hear your thoughts on this report, just as you've just heard us talking about it on the BBC. We've had the report. I think it's very interesting, the report from Banjo Films, which made MasterChef, the BBC, their report into Greg Wallace, which many had expected last Thursday and then Friday, and then it was delayed until today, that has happened to come out terribly conveniently when he's a big star and could be on the front page of the newspapers on the day of this report into this BBC documentary, which featured the son of a Hamas official as the narrator. Do you believe that the BBC didn't know? No one knew. Just 3 people in the independent production company knew that this kid was the son of a Hamas official, or though they have admitted there was basically not enough questions being asked and required to be answered. So the BBC is in breach of its own editorial guidelines. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, can I say that this is obviously an example of news management taking place, because most of the public will know Greg Wallace, but not much about the other issue to do with Hamas. So first and foremost, they'll hope all the headlines will carry the Greg Wallace stuff. Thank goodness for you. But the big issue is the BBC and its idea of impartiality. And this hits right at the heart of the questions that are rising about their coverage in the terrible war in Gaza. But notwithstanding that, they have a responsibility to impartiality. And what this shows is that there's no way in which you can say, oh, well, we didn't know. Yeah. The answer is you should have known, and you should have asked, and you should have done those checks. Because, I know, have my family who's a documentary filmmaker, and the first thing they have to do is to check the sources of the films that they produce. And even if you're getting one produced by somebody, you need to check what their sources are, because you are the responsible body for putting that program.
And especially as there had already been issues raised about this. We'd already had a huge number of questions being raised about some of the sources that were being used by the BBC, writing for the BBC in the Middle East as well, where they were clear, blatant supporting the October 7th massacres, for goodness sake, and people they've described as independent who clearly weren't. This happened again and again. So surely they should have been extra, big red flashing alerts.
Whatever happened to their much exalted fact-check organisation?
Well, they're busy
supposed to check the background.
They're busy fact-checking things that no one cares about. It's much easier.
That's the whole point. They say they've got a fact-check organisation. The fact-check organisation should have checked this documentary and said, do you know who these people are? Do you know what their involvement is? Give us the backstory of it. Let's know. And in fact, it's taken them a ridiculous amount of time to discover that somehow BBC officials didn't know. Not knowing is not an excuse. When you have to know, you should know, then it is as dangerous as those who actually promulgated this documentary in the first place. Yep. Those at the BBC who didn't know, they must carry the can for this as much as anybody else. I'm sorry, but they would be saying the same about anybody in Parliament were that to have happened.
Oh, absolutely. I must read out just a BBC statement. This is a statement from the BBC Director General, Tim Davey, and he says that Peter Johnson, who carried out the report, Peter Johnson's report identifies a significant failing in relation to accuracy in this documentary. I'm sorry for this failing. We will now take action on 2 fronts: fair, clear and appropriate actions to ensure proper accountability and the immediate implementation of steps to prevent such errors being repeated. He says it's critical laying bare the facts of what happened. Nothing is more important than trust and transparency in our journalism. We welcome the actions that the executives are taking to avoid this failing being repeated in the future. I'm sorry, Ian Duncan-Smith, this doesn't really wash. That's not good enough, is it?
Well, no, actually, it comes straight on the heels of the big concert and Villain, Bob Dylan. Yeah. At first, when they announced it, I thought it was Bob Dylan. I was scratching quickly to look at it. But Bob Dylan and that going live on the BBC is another issue, really, when nobody seems to have checked and asked themselves the question, is this guy's record likely to have caused problems before? And of course, this just goes on and on and on. And the answer has to be, what is the backup check? What are the backup questions to be asked of your production group, whoever and whatever they're doing? Do they know what's happening? Do they know who they're talking to? Do they know what the story is and where the context of it is? And none of that seems to happen.
No, indeed. And again, it all ties into that report, which is going to be published tomorrow. Lord Mann, the former Labour MP, John Mann, Dame Penny Mordaunt, former Tory Defence Secretary, still a Tory MP, into basically anti-Semitism in this country being absolutely rife among the sort of the middle classes, the public sector, particularly NHS, education, academia, culture, media. And we see this, don't we?
Well, actually, we did a report some years back when Tony Blair was with John Mann on the rise of anti-Semitism. And I remember we came up with this phrase for it with regards to the rise on the middle-class left, really, I suppose, the chattering classes, where we talked about discursive dinner party anti-Semitism, which basically sort of morphs from being anti-Israel into anti-Jews. And that's what's become quite normal, I think, in too many places. And that has to be battled. It has to be battled, because therein lies terrible dangers for the Jewish community and for all of us, actually,
Absolutely,
frankly.
absolutely. Look, let's turn and talk about something very, very different. And this is the prospect of tax rises in the autumn budget. I think pretty much everyone, even the government, has accepted there's going to be tax rises. They took a £22 billion black hole, which they apparently discovered out of the blue when they went into office. Apparently, it's now about 40 billion quid. We've had some U-turns on winter fuel, on pension, welfare reforms, which means there's loads more money that needs to be spent. And no more money coming in. We're told really that it's going to be middle-class workers. It's going to be people on, well, they're regarded as being, fairly well off, but actually they're on modest incomes. They're being dragged into higher rate tax above that tax threshold to pay 40% tax if they're earning over 50 grand, which many in the capital and many outside the capital are now earning. A looming tax raid. What do you make of that?
Well, let's be honest about this freeze. It took place, to be fair, under previous governments as well, where people didn't get the benefit of uprating on the basis of inflation. So it was frozen, so they got dragged into upper rate tax. The government is doing the same again, and that will affect not sort of wealthy people you think of as wealthy, but it'll affect people like senior nurses, etc., and senior police, all the sort of people that you want to be able to support and to make it attractive for them to be and stay in their jobs.
And who will not regard themselves. You don't even have to be that senior. No. They don't regard themselves as well off because they're not well off.
No, they're not. And they're the sort of people that get up every day, work hard, and try and do whatever they can to help their communities, or for that matter, to create jobs, start businesses. All that sort of area is being hit by the government again and again. And I think this tax rise position next in the budget will be even more than we think, because the government not only has to pick up the slack from what they've lost in such bills like the so-called welfare reform bill, or no reform bill as it should be called now, but the reality for that, plus others, and they have to have an amount of money to give them slack in case events take place. And so the reality is, I think we're heading down the tracks for a very serious tax-raising budget, and one of the groups they're going to really hit are going to be people who are putting money into pensions.
Yeah.
Ironically, they're the group that will take less off the state later on, because they will have provided for themselves. Just the very group you want to encourage, not hammer. And they're going to hammer them because they think, oh, pensions, and no matter, it's just taking some money out of wealthy people. It's not wealthy people. People have worked hard in their lives, put money aside.
And often forgone expenditure now to make sure they're saving for their future.
So
and for
they're
their
not
families.
a burden to their families, not a burden to the state. So that should be encouraged, instead of which the government will see this as a sort of another area to rake over and to get money from people who did the right thing.
Well, again, we've seen this government plummeting in the polls, no doubt at all. One of the big issues, of course, we've got the economy, we've also got immigration. Can I ask you just, we had that one in, one out deal, see if it ever happens, that was announced by Keir Starmer and Emmanuel Macron at that press conference on Thursday. It's just a pilot deal with just 50 people per week. I mean, it doesn't even touch the size of people who arrive by 8 a.m. most mornings, frankly, and on those channel dinghies. But we're told the European Commission is going to have to basically approve this, whether it actually happens. But there's also some talk about, because we've got so many people coming here because of the pull of things like, here's your hotel, here's your hostel, here's some spending money, and feel free to work in the labour black market and no one will notice and you'll never get deported. The ministers are looking at plans to introduce ID cards, but just for migrants as opposed to British people here. Are you concerned, and if at all, by that? And if so, how much?
Well, first of all, can I just say that the one out, one in policy is idiotic, because in fact, if you make people legally coming in as part of the deal, they can bring their family members with them after that. So it's actually one out and anything up to 15 or 20 back in.
Brilliant.
It's the absurdity of that position is nonsense. So there's a first catch. The second thing is, there are pull factors in all the countries. I mean, the truth is, when you look at welfare, welfare in France is every bit as expensive, as it were, as welfare in the UK. I looked at this when I was Secretary of State. The pull factors are basically the fact that we generate more low-level jobs, more start-up jobs than most countries do in Europe. It's the nature of the way our economy works. Yeah. When we had the freedoms, of course, after the government's done with this employment bill, we probably just look like any other country in Europe, because we won't be doing startups, because nobody can afford to run them here in the UK, because the tax levels will be exorbitant, as they're already becoming right now. So that bit was always the great product of the UK. And if you say that's a pull factor, well, it may well be a pull factor, but the way to deal with this, these people pay huge sums of money to get on these ghastly boats and risk their lives. And they only do it for one reason, because they know if they make it to the UK, they'll be able to stay.
Yeah.
So the only way you can stop that is by showing people that if they make it to the UK, they go somewhere else, far away. And what then happens is they have to think, is this worth the effort and the money? And once you do that, then there will be a lessening, if not a complete fall-off, of the illegal boats.
Yeah, and which worked in Australia. I mean, the extraordinary thing, apparently, these smuggling gangs
would have worked as well.
They're offering a 50% off
Rwanda.
summer discount right now.
It would have worked in Rwanda if we hadn't come face-to-face.
If you scaled it up, if it was scaled up to the same level.
It would have been if we hadn't run foul of
Can I ask you about a case of a 69-year-old Palestinian woman who's been allowed to enter Britain to visit her daughter and receive private medical treatment for spinal and mental health conditions after arguing she had a right to family life under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights, despite government objections. So the Home Office said that no, they said this could lead to a proliferation of a very large number of people applying for medical treatment here from people living in Gaza and other war zones. But as always, the upper immigration tribunal ruled that this woman should be allowed into this country because she had a right to a family life and to receive medical treatment here. This is going to open the floodgates, isn't it?
Completely. And what it confirms is that the Convention of Human Rights is not fit for purpose anymore. Yeah. It was designed at a time when it was aimed really at limiting the possibilities of the rise of sort of fascist dictators again in Europe. In fact, what it's now become is a license to stop any elected government, I say any elected government in Europe, from making decisions about trying to protect their borders. Yep. And we're not alone in this, by the way, because every country from France to Italy is now at odds with the ECHR. We're not an outlier here. We are literally, like everybody else, saying we've got a huge migration issue. We have to be able to act as governments who are elected by the people to do that. And I think, therefore, our position has to be, eventually, we're going to have to rethink the whole nature of the ECHR, what it was intended for, yep. and whether or not it can be used as a constant running excuse to just get in and avoid all the laws and the rules that apply in any country, not just the United Kingdom.
Indeed. I don't think it's sufficient to tackle things, but it's certainly necessary, isn't it? But just finally, I want to ask you about net zero, because Ed Miliband has made various, I mean, as he does regularly, various statements. He's been accused of spouting nonsense. He says our way of life is under threat from climate change. There's an £800 billion, that doesn't touch the sides of it actually, net zero cost. And the Met Office have said that basically extreme weather is now going to be the norm. And Ed Miliband said this is a stark warning. Do you agree?
No. I'm one of those that's sick and tired of the constant banging on at people about the temperatures. Yeah, fine, we need to know, but we don't need to bang on and on about it. People are sensible. They'll make the precautions. The reality here, however, is the biggest threat to the British way of life is Ed Miliband. I mean, he's going to plaster solar arrays, most of them, by the way, made by slave labor in Xinjiang, all over farmland, which should be productive right now because there is a shortage of food globally. He's going to be sticking wind farms up that only work when the wind blows, and yet we're still going to have gas-powered electricity, because that's the only one that we know will work no matter whether the sun shines or the wind blows. But we're going to spend, as you just noted, billions upon billions of taxpayers' money to do this, and it's a sort of form of bullying the British people, constantly bullying them, taking money off them for something which that's changing their lives, because they can't start businesses because they're now out of money, and they wonder if they're reasonably wealthy, well, they shouldn't have left the UK and go to another country. That's what we're doing. So the way of life that we had is going.
Or if they wanted to keep their garden looking nice, Yorkshire Water's already, as of Friday, got a hosepipe ban. We've now got one across let's say a fifth of the country. Thames Water covers a fifth of customers. That's being brought in as a temporary hosepipe ban because we've had some warm weather. We don't have enough reservoirs built, by the way, not built by Labour under Blair, not built by you lot for 14 years either.
Yeah, we should have been building many more reservoirs.
We're a nation where it rains half the year. We're surrounded by the sea, but we have to have a hosepipe ban, and people's gardens get ruined because it's been a bit warm. I mean, this is no longer a functioning country, is it?
Well, in Italy, you don't do that. So, and they have higher temperatures for longer in the year. They plan. They think about what they're going to do, all these countries, in the nature of the way their countries work. Our problem has been that when it snows, apparently this is the greatest upset in the world. The trains don't run because snow on the lines. When the sun shines, apparently we've got to ban everything. I mean, I'll be honest with you, it really is a time that the British public were able to say to the government, do what you have to do, for God's sake, to plan for the future, which is what we should be doing, instead of plastering the ground with solar arrays, etc. Do something about water.
Sir Ian Duncan-Smith, great to talk to you, former Conservative Party leader there, and still an MP, of course, Sir Ian Duncan-Smith. Sam Armstrong, I mean, couldn't agree with him more on this. Sir Ed Miliband is the biggest threat to the British way of life. I mean, I do think this, these people, they're properly stark staring bonkers in terms of the climate hysteria, aren't they? We're going to be talking about that a little bit more. But again, there are so many things. We talk about, we start off the show with at 10 o'clock about, middle class workers are facing a looming tax rate. We've got loads of money being spent. We've been borrowing everything. But we don't build anything. We don't plan ahead. We're always living in a permanent sort of emergency, like, we're going to have to charge you more for your electricity or charge you more for your water because we haven't got enough of either, because we don't do long-term planning and we don't do sensible planning. We're going to have high energy prices. We're going to have high transport, high everything. Everything's going to cost more. Food is going up and everything. And so much of it is down to deliberate government policy making our lives more expensive.
Yeah, with this lot, it's almost harder to pick which are the worst between the ideological mad, bad and dangerous Ed Miliband, Bridget Phillipson, or the sort of hapless, brain-dead incompetence like Rachel from Accounts, who lacks both, as far as I can see, the experience, the intellect, or indeed the constitution.
I think she'll find she worked 10 years as a senior economist at the Bank of England. Oh, no, just 5. Sorry. But this lot are in charge of our country, and there are many of us who love this country, who are determined, dedicated to make a success of it. And I see people my age or younger moving abroad, going to the United States, my soul,
to Dubai, etc. The very best. So many of them are fleeing this country.
And we're told, but we're imported the best, the brightest and the best from other countries. But we're not.
Julia,
we're not. That's the reality. We're not.
I don't wish to be unkind, and this isn't all of them, but a great chunk of migration to this country are frankly the dregs. They are the dregs. Those that are coming over illegally are those that are selected for criminality. The jobs that we are selecting for, the salary thresholds have been set so low that these are jobs that could easily have been performed by British people. We stopped training them. We did so to save pennies.
And we stopped expecting it as well. For me, virtually every single net zero, taxes, welfare, housing, immigration policy, they are all, and NHS, all the pressures, they are all one big problem, and they're just different parts of the same problem.
I don't want to.
You can't solve any of it without solving all of it.
I don't want to be depressed. It does feel like happy Monday, everybody. The country's
no, here's the thing. No, because it is a happy Monday. Because here's why. Because I know that you and I think that's one of the reasons why people tune into this show as well. For all our guests and to hear. Because I have people come up to me in the street and say, sometimes people hug me. And it's a little bit frightening if you're not expecting a hug. I'm not going to lie. Thank you for keeping me sane. Thank you for saying the stuff I want to say, or that we're saying privately. And it is that because we do believe in this country. country. We do believe in the British people, and we do believe that this country's best times are not behind it, and that we are an amazing country and we can do so. But we could just do so much better, and we're being let down by large swathes of our political classes and our media. And because it's absolute failure to hold people to account on the right things, as opposed to, oh, why are you cutting welfare for someone who's got ADHD? That's not holding people to account. I absolutely believe, I do believe this is the greatest country in the world. I'm sorry, the Americans are completely wrong. They really are. This is the greatest country in the world. We've got our history, our culture, what we've given to the world, what we've done for the world. Not all perfect, but what countries is. But there is something about the British psyche, the British attitude, we're so grounded. I think this is a great country, and I just want politicians who vaguely measured up to the average Brit to be in charge. That's all I want, to actually deliver for us.
We are lions led by donkeys.
Love it,
and
totally.
The recovery of this country, our great hope, our great future starts by kicking out this rabble from Downing Street and every other branch of Whitehall.
Yep, 12:27 is the time. Love to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. Give us a call. Coming up, we're also going to be talking to Rupert Darwell about the net zero madness, and also we've got a brace of Ruperts. We're going to talk to Rupert Bell about the Royal Peace Summit that we weren't supposed to find out about, but they happened to do it in a place where everyone would know they were, so we did find out about it. Oh, how did that happen? This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
Aides representing the royal households of the King and Prince Harry have been having a little chit-chat, possibly about how to heal the rift. Charlotte joins us now. What is going on?
Well, aides for Prince Harry, two of them, one of them Meredith Maines, who is Meghan and Harry's right-hand woman in Montecito, flew over, met with this other guy called Liam Maguire, who's their kind of UK sort of head of comms, and they went and had a very secret clandestine meeting in St James's with Tobin Andre.
This is Talk. 12:30 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's squeeze in some calls very quickly before we go to our brace of Ruperts talking about two of the other bigger stories of the day. Let's go to Kevin, who's on the line in North Yorkshire. He's called in on 0344 499 1000. And you want to talk about, well, the climate madness, which chimes very nicely with our next. Guess what you want to say?
I just want to say about the meteorologists and the reports. It's just absolute
Be polite.
Stupidity. Yeah, I'm trying to.
I was worried about the words then.
yeah. Sorry about that. No, I was listening last month. I think it was. It was a BBC chap on the TV, and he was saying, "Oh, it's been the hottest month on record."
Yeah.
Since 1950, and then he finished the comment off by saying bar 3. So basically, he was saying the 4th hottest one, but he didn't read it like that. He said, "Oh, it's the hottest one."
But also, it's always since records began. Well, when did you start doing these records? You know,
exactly. And the other fact is, I mean, I'm far too quickly approaching 60, and I remember 1976, and the issue being that there were, up in Yorkshire where I am, there were standpipes in the street, and there were 10 million less people in the country, yet they had standpipes in the street.
Yeah.
And yet we are the hottest and driest? I don't think so. I think it's just absolute fearmonger.
Well, Well, we're going to talk to Rupert Darwell about this, and I'm sure you'll be wanting to wait to hear what he has to say. Thank you very much indeed for that, Kevin. I think that's the classic British. Oh, for goodness' sake! It's like you'll die if you get on a train or a bus without a bottle of water. Really, I mean, how have human beings survived all of these millennia? Let's talk to Robert. He's in Hertfordshire, and Robert, you want to talk about the European Convention on Human Rights, that the Palestinian woman from Gaza able to come here because of her right to a family life and getting private health treatment.
No, we suspend all asylum seekers now indefinitely till we sort our country out. What I propose is we have a referendum in this country to decide whether we stay in the ECHR or not. We can't do it. I mean, some people say it won't make no difference. Yes, it will. Yes, it will.
It's the start. It's not enough. I tell you what, I hate to tell you, Robert, since we voted the wrong way in 2016, we're never going to be allowed another referendum on something like that because we might do the wrong thing again.
Well, this country is finished. Forget about Nigel Farage. I'm a member of the Reform Party, and I'm going to tear my ticket up because he's terrified of radical Islam. He's absolutely terrified. He's not a leader, and he ain't going to do any better than Starmer. But I'm sorry to break people's hearts.
Really? Why do you think that?
Because, well, the European Court of Human Rights for a start off, and all the radical lawyers. All that's happening is preening and posturing, and we're going to do this and we're going to do that, and he's not going to be able to do anything. Listen, we need to be right wing now, and I
don't even think it's right wing. I think it's middle mainstream. These views are mainstream.
Well, I think what's happening is as well, you've got Marxism creeping into the health service, into the unions. Let's get one thing straight. The country, the government love it when people are out of work. They love it when small businesses close up. You know why? Because Marxism they hate free enterprise.
But we're all going to be on the basic universal income. We will own nothing. And we will be happy, apparently. Robert, thank you for that. I've got to go to a quick break. And then we're going to be talking more about net zero and how this really underpins an awful lot of the problems in this country. That's why I bang on about it so much. 12:34 is the time. This is Talk. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just to remind you, breaking news at midday, that we have had that report, long-awaited report into, well, not just at 10 o'clock this morning, into Greg Wallace and wrongdoing by him. He, of course, already was sacked from the BBC after Banjay Productions, the independent production company, brought out a report that's saying of the 83 different allegations against him, 45 had been substantiated, but only one of them involved any inappropriate touching. It was largely language and inappropriate behaviour, they claim, which is what Greg Wallace had said last week. But it is interesting that Greg Wallace report was due to come out last Thursday. And then it was due to come out last Friday. And then suddenly it decided to come out this morning. And, of course, Greg Wallace, very famous name. I'm sure his face is going to be the face that's coming on the front page of all the papers tomorrow, instead of what should, I think, be on the front page of the papers tomorrow, which is the BBC internal report into what happened with the Gaza documentary, where they basically paid for a lad who was the son of a Hamas ministerial official, i.e. a member of a prescribed terrorist organisation, to front a documentary. Well, we are told by the BBC that basically the production company, 3 members of the production company, independent production company, did know, but they didn't know. It's quite clear, though, that they didn't ask enough questions. They were insufficiently proactive about this, and there has been a breach of editorial guidelines. Now, we had a statement from Tim Davey, the Director General, and he says this report identifies a significant failing in relation to accuracy in this documentary. We've had a statement from the production company as well, and they say there's no evidence of inappropriate influence on the content of the documentary from any third party. Oh, that's good. Hamas isn't actually influencing the documentaries. But the Culture Secretary, Lisa Nandy, has said the BBC has made big strides to reset its relationship with the public after a series of catastrophic failures in recent weeks. She's been very critical, of course, the Glastonbury Bob Villan outrage, I would say. She told reporters that she's pleased there's been an acknowledgement about what a catastrophic failure this has been, and says the corporation has put rapid measures to restore public confidence in place. Well, good luck with that, but it seems to me that the way they are managing the news by putting out both of those reports on this, making sure they both come out on the same day, suggests they don't really get it. But there we are. Let's turn our attention to something else. Let's talk about net zero. So Sam Armstrong and I have been discussing throughout the show the issues with net zero, the cost of net zero, the implications for our lives, our daily lives, and pretty much our future of this country, all rest on this insane, well, religious zealotry level policy. Let's talk about this with Rupert Darwell. He's the author of Green Tyranny and joins us now. Very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you, Julia.
Now, there's quite a lot to talk about here. I'm going to throw it all at you, and then you tell me where you think they all line in. Because Ed Miliband has been criticised over his nonsense climate change warning, saying that, this is the biggest threat to Britain's way of life. Sri and Douglas Smith just said Ed Miliband is the biggest threat to Britain's way of life. But there's talk about this £800 billion cost of the net zero plan. This was reported last week. I don't know why that's a surprise. £1 trillion was what a former Treasury reporter put it at. Today, the Met Office is saying that extreme weather is now the UK's new normal. And this comes as Ed Miliband says he wants to do an annual sort of state of the climate report to the House of Commons, and says this is the thing we should most be focusing on. What do you make of all of those claims?
Julia, I think it's absurd and ridiculous to put a few extra days of hot weather, a few extra days of heat wave as the single biggest problem Britain is facing. It is just so absurd. I think what it does show is that Ed Miliband is severely rattled about net zero, that the criticisms of net zero are hitting home, that the consequences of net zero in forcing up energy prices, in putting manufacturing industry, putting workers out of work, in fundamentally changing our lifestyle because of the increase in energy. I think that has all hit home, and that is why he's had recourse to these absurd claims he's making.
So doubling down, as we often see in religious zealots, they tend to double down rather than see the error of their ways. No, we know. I mean, this cost. I mean, this is the thing. They talk about the Met Office saying this extreme weather is our new normal. I mean, Yeah, I mean, was it last year we had the 40+ degrees or whatever? But there is an issue in terms of, like, it's obviously we're having heat waves, yes. But then we have some years, I remember very vividly, because I didn't have any outdoor space in my previous home. We moved to a home which had a big garden, and then I remember we had absolutely rotten summers for 2 years, absolutely miserable. That would have been around about 18 years ago. And I remember also everyone going, oh, wasn't it wonderful during lockdown, all this lovely weather, people who were lucky enough to have gardens. And then we had, I think it was a fairly rotten period, quite a lot of a couple of years ago. We never seem to remember when we have a rotten spring or a rotten summer. We only remember the good, the hot ones. But isn't that because actually we rather enjoy them? Are they getting worse, inverted commas, i.e. hotter, or is a lot of this down to how they are measured?
I think, I mean, this is pure climate alarmism, because it's not, I wouldn't even call it reasoning. The way it goes is the climate is changing, therefore we've got to decarbonise. Yeah. And there are lots of steps that are missing from that. The first of all, is it a net cost or a net benefit to Britain? Are we worse off from having a gently warmer climate? And that is a very open question. It's one that the government and the Met Office, actually the Met Office isn't competent to decide that. But is having having less cold winters, less frosty mornings, as against warmer summers, is that a net benefit or a net cost to Britain?
Can I put my hand up and say definitely a net benefit? But this is the thing. The solution should be, we're told you, people die. People die in the heat. Carry a bottle of water, people die. But the reality is, in every country and in every continent, even in Africa, which has extreme heat, India, more people die from cold than die from heat. Cold is the real 9 out of 10 people who die from the extreme weather die from cold rather than heat. Heat is not the killer in the same way that cold is. But the countries that are much hotter than ours routinely, they've got this cunning solution, haven't they? They've got this thing called air conditioning. But the thing about air conditioning, you need to use electricity. So the solution to us getting hotter would be surely cheaper energy, so we could all fit air conditioning.
Yeah, it's called adaptation. And adaptation is a great no-no in climate alarmism because it's what humans would always do, is adapt to change. And essentially, because that's the common sense response to changing weather, changing climate, that is ruled out, because what they insist on is radical decarbonisation. And of course, the other step is the belief that we live in a climate bubble, that somehow what we do with our emissions will change our weather, which is, of course, complete nonsense. And that, of course, is always omitted from what the Milibandistas are telling us about climate.
We're not going to affect it. Look, again, climate change. Now, climate changes, we know that. We're often told this, we are at record levels post the Industrial Revolution. Because we had a 20-year hiatus when we didn't see any global warming. Only in my lifetime, people were warning, and very serious scientists. This was, front page of Time magazine and The Economist, that we were heading for a global freeze. We were heading into a new ice age. We know that not just weather, but long-term climate, well, even 10, 20, 30 years ago, it changes, it oscillates. It's often to do with, ocean currents and solar flares and like. There's lots of different reasons. So we know that climate changes. Is it just getting warmer because we're coming out very slowly over thousands of years from a mini ice age? Or is it getting warmer because of man-made emissions? And if we got rid of man-made emissions, would that stop? I suppose is a crucial question there.
The reliance, the climate crowd have to rely on computer models to try and give some hint of that. And the problem is the climate models are incredibly erroneous. But the climate is an incredibly complex, chaotic system, which is, in essence, is impossible to model. You have to get the starting conditions right, which is you have to assume that the climate is in equilibrium, but the climate's never in equilibrium. So there are fundamental methodological problems with what they're doing. But even so, is the response to Britain going it alone and decarbonising the right thing to do? And we might be a net beneficiary from gentle warming, so that
I would say
farms in the south, farmland in the south of the country is being converted to becoming vineyards, And in doing that, the value increases.
Yeah.
Is that a cost or a benefit? Clearly, it's a benefit. The British economy is better off.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, my husband, who grew up in Stoke-on-Trent, he says he can remember very vividly in his childhood waking up to ice on the inside of the bedroom window. That was completely the norm in a winter. We're not seeing that. That's a good thing, isn't it? But also, crucially, there's loads of evidence, isn't there, that again, countries getting wealthier means they can adapt better, which means that, for instance, to any sort of climate issues we get, whether it's floods, whether it's droughts, whether it's fires, whatever, we're actually able to adapt more, and that's why you see far fewer deaths by 99% fall since the beginning of the 20th century. So over 120 years, we've seen a 99% fall because countries have got richer and they're able to adapt more to things. But also, crucially, I suppose it just comes down to whether or not you say, is it man-made climate change? Is it happening to the extent that it's a natural problem, or is it actually a net benefit with the greening of the planet, which we have seen over recent decades, which again produces more food? Just final question: why do you think people like Ed Miliband are just so wedded to the idea that this is a crisis and it's something that is caused by man and therefore within the control of man to stop? Why are they so wedded to that when so much evidence is there that it's not a crisis?
Well, environmentalism is an ideology. You've got to analyse it and think of it in terms of being an ideology. And it's replaced socialism or Marxism, as we know. Ed Miliband's father was a Marxist theoretician. It is, with the collapse of communism in the late 1980s, environmentalism is the new left of centre ideology. In fact, originally
ban hating Jews.
It was extreme. It was on the extreme right, and traditional socialists were very opposed to this because they understood that the people who would pay for environmentalism were working people. Yeah. And that remains the case.
And we see that,
working people who are the big losers.
And we see that the GMB union and others who are fighting against a lot of this madness because they know it's going to cost jobs. Lovely to talk to you, Rupert Dale. Thank you very much indeed. A final quick word to Simon Armstrong on that.
My fear is that as much talk as we can all have here, it's not going to make any difference. This lot are mad. They are utterly mad. He is as devoted to this as anyone. And look,
this is the end is nigh. It's like the bloke on Oxford Street with the billboard saying the end is nigh.
But just in the last year with Donald Trump's election, the United States is going to take a different path to us now. It's saying no, forget about all of
China,
this.
India, everyone else.
Even if they were entirely right, surely the fact that the world's biggest economies are now saying burn baby burn, dig baby dig, surely that has to give us pause to reflect. Apparently not.
No. We're going to carry on with the insanity and our economy is going to collapse, but well done, at least it'll be warm, we'll have nice summers. We won't be able to afford aircon or even an ice cream, but we'll be happy. Coming up next, going to take a quick break, then we're going to be talking to another Rupert Bell. Haven't spoken to him for a while. Talks Royal correspondent about this big peace summit between Prince Harry's people and King Charles's people, but will we see a rapprochement between the father and son? That's coming up next. This is Talk.
Do you still get called Jet, Diane, or have people managed to get over that and call you by your name now?
It depends. It depends entirely on the situation. People go, Diane.
How on earth did you end up getting involved?
I'd done a fitness competition, and it'd been photographed and videoed. In the very early days, that it wasn't a bodybuilding competition, because I'd been a dancer and a choreographer and teacher and stuff beforehand. So I was sort of spotted, and then I had the casting agent, Andy Norgate, who went on to be one of the referees in the whole of the original series.
Talk the Home of Common Sense to be Julia Hartley-Brewer. Just some breaking news. Donald Trump has posted on his Truth Social site saying the USA has been ripped off on trade and military by friend and foe alike for decades. It's come at a cost of trillions of dollars, just not sustainable any longer, and never was. Basically he's saying it's the end of the free ride. Goodness knows what that's going to mean for everybody, but we know there are more tariffs coming in for the EU and other countries as well. Expecting also a big statement possibly today on Putin and Russia, and maybe Donald Trump has finally woken up to the fact that he's been played by the Russian leader. Well, we'll find out. Now, the question is, has King Charles been played by Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex, Meghan? Over the weekend, we understand there had been a meeting between Prince Harry's people and King Charles's people. They decided to do it somewhere very quiet in the back room where no one could possibly see them. No, of course they didn't. They did it in a well-known private members club sitting outside where, of course, they could be photographed. Apparently, Meghan and Harry are horrified that anyone's found out about it. But I wonder what the King thinks. Well, let's talk about all this with Talk's royal correspondent Rupert Bell, who joins us. A very good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. What do you make, first of all, that there was this summit between their senior staff, and secondly, that we found out about it and there are pictures of them having this summit? Because I've got a funny feeling having your meeting at a club where Royal Overseas League in St James's, where pretty much every other member there will have known who these poshies were, would not help you to keep it quiet.
No, it certainly wouldn't. And but a summit, I wouldn't go as far as that. It's not all gun. I think it was getting together, presumably over a glass of something, just to see where the ground is between the various parties. Because I do think Harry is currently a rudderless ship. He doesn't know what he's going to do. And he's got the Invictus Games round the corner in this country in 2027. And that is obviously going to be a big deal for him, but it obviously would seem rather odd that if his father doesn't turn up to something that is celebrating servicemen and women through the Invictus Games. So I think
yes, you've got to make that point. By the way, that's 2 years away. Yeah. I mean, I think people might have expected something rather soon. I think for me, I would say rather soon, it's the fact that Harry and Meghan's children haven't seen their grandparents or their uncle and aunt or their cousins in years. Some of them, I don't. Has Lilibet even met her grandfather yet?
I may have done, but what you're seeing is basically at the moment, Meghan is saying it's not happening. And Harry knows he's feeling at the moment bereft because he's got no friends in California. He's feeling cast off from his family. So he's lonely. So I think that's part of the reason that he actually wants to reconnect with his family, which he was a close member of and a popular member of.
Yeah, and very close with William. They were incredibly close to him, very different brothers, but also so close with William and with Kate that he moved in with them in a very large apartment. It's not like us all bunking up on, he wasn't sleeping on the sofa in the back room, was he? But we were talking about a very close relationship, and that's now completely severed. Now, there's been no talk about William and Harry getting a relationship together again. But is this really because, is this because he wants, he's regretting it and the hot-headedness has ended, he wants to get back with his family? Or is it because basically they're running out of money? They spend it like water. They've got no real big streams of income coming in. They've basically a busted flush. Other than selling her birth video, they've got nothing left to sell. Her jam ain't making the money, on her silly, Meghan side. So actually, they need the royal family rather more, it seems, than the royal family need them.
Well, you forgot to mention Meghan's wonderful rosé, which I'm sure you would love to test, Julia.
There's no rosé I wouldn't love to test, so yeah.
Well, funny enough, I thought that might be a poison of choice for you. But anyway, it is just sad because he's got no friends in America. Because she's cast off from her family. Yeah. He's rent asunder from his family. So what you've got is a man who's now thinking, I've turned 40, what's going on? Because he hasn't got anything to do. She's trying to launch these various things, whether it be a podcast. It's not jam, it's a spread, actually, Julia.
Sorry, can't legally be called a jam. Yes, you're right.
It's a spread, so... and it just is actually a mess for him. And I think he does feel that actually I wouldn't mind getting back together with my father because, A, he's recovering from some form of cancer. Yeah. And as he said in that interview, don't know how long he's got to live, which was, which is a reality statement. Which is a fact. No one knows how long we've got to live. So I just think it's sad. And I think he's trying to say, perhaps we need to find a way. But at the moment, the question is, who leaked this? Was it Meghan's team and the Sussex team? They're saying no. So how has it ended up being at the same time that the Princess of Wales is making her appearances as patron at Wimbledon? So taking some of the shine up. Tough job, but she is patron, so she's fully entitled to go there. But, and we'd all love that ticket, Alcaraz Sinner. But, she went to that. But, of course, that was being blazoned everywhere. But the big headline yesterday was, of course, about the families getting together again.
Yeah, absolutely. Really good to talk to you, Rupert Bell. Thank you very much. Talks Royal Correspondent. He led me in perfectly there because Sam Armstrong, I've been ranting about this. I can't get over with Wimbledon, the ladies' final, not even an hour, two sets straight, 6-love, and then an epic, well, not massive, but certainly a very well over 3 hours men's final.